owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Purimont para intratnamiento wino infringe de recos de autorenales. Los direcos de la novela y la imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 1001. Morning at the new pasture. Cock-a-doodle-doo. In the early morning, just as the sky was getting light, the familiar crowing of roosters rang out. It seemed that because they had moved to a new home, the two little roosters were particularly excited. They started chasing the hens non-stop early in the morning, making the entire temporary chicken coop a mess. Hey, little guys, if you continue like this, your life will probably be in danger. Ryan, who was wearing only a thin shirt and lit a cigarette skillfully, smiled and kicked the temporary chicken coop with his feet, signaling these guys to behave themselves. You know, it's only 6 o'clock in the morning, and the boss is sleeping soundly. If they are woken up by these guys, Ryan is sure that they will become a plate of greasy braised chicken nuggets. Oh, okay, forgive him for not being used to the kind of Chinese food. Hey, buddy, good morning. Yawning, Rui stretched his waist and trotted out of the villa. Today was the first day he came to this new ranch, and he almost overslept. That's right, more than half a month has passed since Kinzu and his friends visited the ranch. In the past half month, everything that should be prepared has been prepared, and everything that should be said goodbye has been said goodbye. So, yesterday, while the sun was shining, Kinzu directly chartered 2 business jets, borrowed some people from Boundless, and moved his family here at once. Moreover, what made Kinzu most happy was that the 5 cowboys recruited by the ranch at the beginning actually chose to come to Montana with him at the last moment. Well, since they didn't expect that they would all come with them, and they were the kind with families, the ranch's house suddenly seemed a little stretched. With no other choice, Kinzu waved his hand and decided to live in the big villa for the time being. Anyway, the place was big enough. These foreigners didn't know what politeness was, so they moved in directly and chose a room to live in first. There was nothing he could do. This was originally because he didn't do his job well. Now that people will come with you, you don't give them a place to live. Isn't this cheating them? Therefore, Kinzu could only let the female bodyguards down. Originally, each of them had enough rooms, but now 2 or 3 of them had to squeeze into one room. Fortunately, the construction area of these bedrooms was large enough. Not to mention 2 or 3 people, even 5 or 6 people could live in one room. Let's go and meet new friends. We can't let them say we're impolite. Ryan adjusted the collar of his shirt, carried his things, and led the way to the stable. Hey, that's true. Wait for me. Nodding slightly, Rui knew that what this guy said was indeed true, so he ran after him. As cowboys, especially old cowboys with many years of experience, they didn't want to be looked down upon. A moment later, the 2 carrying their usual saddles arrived at the door of the stable on foot, but found that the other guys had arrived earlier than them. Hi, Locke, Feder, and Little Otto. Ryan casually put his things behind his back and greeted them with a smile. How did you sleep last night? Did you dream about anything you shouldn't have dreamed about? I really didn't. Locke, who seemed to be hit on the point, rubbed his nose awkwardly, laughed twice, and changed the subject. Brother Ryan, how did you sleep? That house seems a bit old. Old? It's a retro style, okay? Ryan pouted with disdain and pushed open the door of the stable and walked in. Now rich people like to play like this. They don't live in brand new big villas, but have to live in those retro attics, castles, etc. I really don't know what's good about them. Maybe, this is why we don't have money. Feder shrugged and said helplessly. As the mechanics of the ranch, Kinzu specially asked these 2 brothers to come here. There is no way. Montana is too large. You may not meet a person even if you drive for 2 hours. If the machine or something suddenly breaks down, it may take a day or 2 to find a technician to repair it. Therefore, Kinzu had already made up his mind that if they didn't come, he would use money to make them come. Fortunately, they were all sensible and didn't let Kinzu use any rough means, so they came honestly. However, if these 2 guys knew what they missed, I don't know if they would be so depressed that they would want to bang their heads against the wall. Hey, Ryan, come and see. Waving at Ryan who was still wandering around, Rui smiled and said, the horses here are all good, even compared to the horses in our previous ranch, they are not much different. Maybe the nutrient content of the grass here is higher. Ryan shrugged, but the expression on his face did not look very happy. Because Rui's words reminded him of his previous mounts, and he didn't know how they were doing now, but there was nothing he could do about it. The distance was too far, and it was not worth it to transport a quarter horse by plane. Let's go. The boss has already said that our task for the next few days is to get familiar with the ranch. Ryan came back to his senses and randomly chose a satin black quarter in the stable and began to saddle up. Just as he said, they didn't have any specific tasks for the next few days. Because there were not many cattle and sheep on the ranch, and now there were cowboys in charge. Therefore, their only task now is to get familiar with the terrain of the ranch and get familiar with the cowboys who had worked there before. After all, they would all live under the same roof in the future, so it would be better to get to know each other better. When Kinzu woke up from his sleep, it was already past 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Looking at the few rays of sunlight shining into the bedroom through the curtains, Kinzu stretched lazily and sat up with his back against the head of the bed. Obviously, Ryan's worries were unnecessary. Although the crowing of the big roosters was not small, it was not enough to wake Kinzu up. Because, in each bedroom, the previous owner had done sound insulation. Not to mention, living in it is different from the previous room. As if she was awakened by Kinzu's action, Zumengyo lazily turned over and asked vaguely, "Honey, what time is it?" "Well, it's almost 10:30, 5 minutes to go." Kinzu picked up the alarm clock on the bedside and looked at it, and answered casually, "Oh, 10:30. Zumengyo agreed dazedly, and just wanted to continue sleeping, but suddenly she seemed to react to something and sat up in shock. "What? 10:30? Honey, you didn't see it wrong." Rubbing her eyes that were still a little hard to open, although Zumengyo's voice revealed a trace of fatigue, she still forced herself to sit up. "How could it be? Look for yourself." Kinzu handed the alarm clock over casually, and asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "Oh, it's all your fault. You killed me." Zumengyo pouted her little mouth, rolled her eyes at Kinzu, and quickly got up and walked to the bathroom. "I still have to clean up the villa today. You tormented me so much that I don't have the energy to do it. Go find someone else next time and don't bother me anymore." Chapter 1002. Eva wants to join the sorority. Cleaning up that villa is easy to say, but it is not an easy task to do it. Especially for the current villa. Not to mention other things, just the things they brought with them for this move took 10 pickup trucks from the ranch to move. Fortunately, Zumengyo was not fighting alone. Looking at the sisters Dale and Eva who had been waiting downstairs for a long time, Zumengyo smiled embarrassedly and came forward to greet them warmly. Because of this move, Eva, who had just been in school for a few days, skipped classes again to help. Well, of course. In name, it was to help, but in fact, this girl wanted to familiarize herself with the future environment in advance. After all, she is one of the future hostesses of the ranch. If she doesn't even know what her own ranch looks like, it will be no fun. Besides, there must be a place for her in that big villa, right? What if Kinzu doesn't prepare a room for her because she is in school, and she doesn't know where to live when she goes back? Kinzu certainly didn't know what this girl was thinking, so when he saw her, he just felt that this girl's studies were in vain. How could she learn well if she skipped classes every other day? Although he felt a little helpless, Kinzu didn't say anything. Anyway, asking her to study was just to let her exercise, so that she would have an excuse to manage the ranch. "Boss, good morning." When Kinzu finished washing up, changed into a loose denim outfit and went downstairs, Dale and Eva, who were discussing how to clean the room in the living room, stood up and greeted him with a smile. "Good morning, did you sleep well last night?" Yawning, Kinzu looked at the two big horses opposite him, both of whom had some kind of secret relationship with him, and felt a little itchy in his heart. He really wanted to know what it would feel like when these two big horses served him together. However, looking at the somewhat forced smile on Dale's face, Kinzu knew that this matter could only be thought about. "Of course, it's so comfortable here, I don't even want to go back to school." Eva, who brought Kinzu a hearty breakfast from the kitchen, looked at him with a sad face. The meaning was obvious, she wanted to play at the ranch for 2 more days. "You can't not go." Waving his hand, Kinzu ignored the pitiful look of the little girl and said with a smile, "If you skip class again, I guess your tutor will call me, and I don't know what to say then." This, pursing her lips, thinking of the super responsible tutor she was following now, the expression on Eva's face became more bitter. She had no doubt that if she didn't ask for leave or asked for too much leave, the old man would definitely let her go. Although she didn't want to go to school, Eva didn't want to be kicked out of the school. This kind of thing, once is enough. She doesn't want it to happen again. Okay, anyway, you have a good rest these 2 days on Sunday. I'll take you to class on Monday. Shaking his head, Kinzu picked up the breakfast in front of him and said while eating, "By the way, Eva, when you were in school, you have to help me supervise little John. This guy can't be lazy like you. We will let him manage our ranch in the future." Lazy? God, are you kidding me? It would be fine if she didn't say this. As soon as she talked about this, a few traces of shame flashed across Eva's face. What's wrong? Seeing that the girl's face seemed a little wrong, Kinzu quickly sat up and asked with some concern. "Nothing, I mean little John." After shaking her head and signaling Kinzu not to worry, Eva smiled bitterly and said, "This guy has almost never left the door since he entered the school. After class every day, he goes to the cafeteria, library, and dormitory. He is almost like a robot. So hard-working." Kinzu looked at Eva with some surprise and asked uncertainly. Although he knew that this girl would not say such nonsense for no reason, Kinzu found it even harder to believe that in such an impetuous money-oriented society like the United States, there are still people who can settle down and study. Of course, I'm not the only one who knows this. After nodding her head affirmatively, Eva looked at Kinzu in a strange way, covered her mouth and chuckled twice, and teased, "Boss, you don't know that this guy is now famous in school. Every move is watched by people." "Why?" This time it was not Kinzu who asked, but Zumengyo, Mrs. Zhu, who walked in from the door. However, this question was exactly what Kinzu wanted to ask, so after Zumengyo asked, Kinzu also followed up. "Yes, Eva, this guy is not very handsome, how can he be so famous?" "Because of you." After chuckling twice, Eva greeted Zumengyo and looked at Kinzu with a smile on her face. "Me?" Kinzu pointed at himself in surprise, and he felt a little incredible. "I've never been to school except to send you to school, okay? Could it be, bingo? It seems that you've thought of it, boss." Eva stretched out her hand and snapped her fingers, and explained with a chuckle. "Just because you beat up the fraternity guys at school, and they didn't dare to get back at you, it proves how high your status is. And at the time, he was with you, so naturally he became famous. What about you?" Kinzu didn't follow the little girl's words and ask him what would happen after he became famous. Instead, he looked at her with a smirk. "Me? What's wrong with me?" Blinking her big eyes, Eva looked at Kinzu as if she didn't understand. However, Kinzu would not be fooled by such tricks. He laughed and teased. "He, the supporting role, has become famous. Aren't you, the heroine, famous?" "Of course I am." With a frown on her face, the smile on Eva's face gradually faded, and she complained with a bitter face. "Because of knowing that incident, many sororities have invited me now, and I can't refuse them." "Sorority? Don't pay attention to them." Kinzu frowned and didn't expect that the sequel of that incident would be so serious. If Eva was a man and joined those clubs, Kinzu would certainly not ask. But she is a girl, and those fraternities, sororities, and the like, Kinzu heard the most about gatherings, happiness, and parties. Moreover, they were all very bad. So, when he heard that someone invited her, Kinzu immediately felt a little disgusted. "Well, honey, isn't it good to join a few clubs in college?" Seeing Kinzu's reaction, Zumengyo, who was studying how to organize the villa, couldn't help but look up in surprise. In her opinion, isn't it normal to join a few interest clubs in college? Why did this guy react so strongly? Chapter 1003. The older I get, the more cowardly I become. Actually, Kinzu was not against Eva joining the club. It was just that he had seen too much negative news about these American college clubs on the internet in recent years. Especially the fraternities and sororities who held parties every other day, which left a deep impression on him. So, when Kinzu heard the news, he subconsciously expressed his opposition. "Hey, husband, are you thinking too much?" After listening to Kinzu's explanation, Zumengyo couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. "What you said are only phenomena in second- and third-rate schools. Such things are rare in Ivy League universities." "Really? How do you know?" Touching his nose, Kinzu asked curiously, "Have you studied in the United States?" "No." Shaking his head, Zumengyo explained with a smile, "But Wantong and Surui have studied in American universities. Sometimes I have heard them talk about these things." "Okay." Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu turned his head to look at Eva and said with a smile, "That's fine. You can also try any clubs you are interested in." "No." Eva decisively rejected Kinzu's kindness. I go to school mainly to study, not to play. What's the point of joining a club? Well, it's up to you. After looking at this girl for a while, looking at her serious eyes, Kinzu could only sigh helplessly. He knew that it must be his attitude at the beginning that made her mistakenly think that he didn't like her joining the club. However, Kinzu had no good solution for this. After giving a few instructions, he stood up and left the living room of the villa. Because the women were going to clean up the villa. Boss, good morning. Seeing Kinzu coming out, Erica, who was directing the female bodyguards to clean up the yard, smiled and greeted him. Although Zumengyo and others were cleaning up that villa, the huge yard still needed the help of the female bodyguards. Woof woof woof, woof woof woof. Kinzu didn't have time to say anything, and suddenly two big white dogs rushed out from the side and directly climbed on him and acted coquettishly. Damn, Dahaha, get down here. Kinzu was almost thrown to the ground by the two guys when he was caught off guard. However, after being scolded by Kinzu, the two guys didn't hesitate at all. Instead, they licked their faces and came over, pretending to be kissing. Go away, if you keep being naughty, I'll punish you. Kinzu slapped Dieu on the head. Looking at the two huskies in front of him, whose hide was almost up to his thighs, he felt an inexplicable sense of intimacy. He didn't know when he started to become busier and busier, and he lacked the necessary communication with these little guys at home. Where are Dieu and Xiaoyu? Aren't you together? Woof woof woof. Turning his head to look behind him, Dieu started to circle around Kinzu, and the meaning was obvious, the two guys were there. What is this guy hiding for? Kinzu pouted and took Dieu and to the corner of the villa. Clap, 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 clap. Kinzu had just turned around and heard a panicked chicken cry before he saw Dieu and Xiaoyu. Oh my god, these two guys, are they planning to take those chickens? Originally, according to Zumengyo's idea, there was no point in keeping these chickens, so it would be better to kill them and eat them directly. But Kinzu couldn't bear to part with them. He had finally got these chickens, and he was counting on them to breed a group of chickens for the ranch. Well, I have not eaten the chickens that I brought from afar with great effort. If these two guys ruined them, Kinzu would probably cry. When they got closer, Kinzu heard the calls of Dao and Lu, but what surprised him was that the calls of these two guys seemed a little different from usual. It feels like they're afraid of something. After turning another corner and bypassing a flower bed, a scene of chickens and dogs jumping around finally appeared in front of Kinzu. But what almost made him pop his eyes out was that it wasn't Dieu and who were causing trouble for the chickens, but two big red-haired roosters who were chasing the two little tigers. Suddenly seeing Kinzu appear in front of them, Dieu and rushed towards Kinzu as if they had seen a savior. Hectors and Hector seemed to have been accustomed to this. Seeing this, they jumped directly into the chicken coop and barked at the big rooster. Facing two little tigers who were not much taller than it, the big rooster could still give it a try, but facing Hectors, who was directly crushing it in terms of height and weight, the big red-haired rooster was very tactful and slipped away with its tail between its legs. Woof woof woof. After barking a few times with great pride, Hectors and Hectors were like generals returning from victory, and they walked around in front of Dieu and Xiao in a proud manner. I say, what's going on with you guys? Confused, Kinzu squatted down and looked at the big tiger and the little tiger, whose hair was a little messy and whose expressions were a little dejected. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. Come on, you are tigers, okay? Tigers are afraid of chickens? As if seeing Kinzu's confusion, the big tiger raised his head and cried out in grievance. Woof woof. Well, listening to this incongruous cry, Kinzu understood it instantly. It seems that these two guys have been with her for a long time. They didn't learn anything else, but they learned the essence of cowards. Kinzu still remembered a few words that were circulated on the internet to describe huskies. Kinzu couldn't remember the specific words, but one thing was very clear. That is, they never lost in a quarrel and never won in a fight. Looking at her who was smug beside him, Kinzu couldn't help but have an idea in his mind. If her hadn't been so big that it frightened the big red-haired rooster, it would be hard to say whether this guy could beat it. Boss, what's wrong? With a burst of hurried footsteps, Erica and two female bodyguards also rushed over. They thought something had happened when they heard the commotion here just now. Erica was relieved until she saw Kinzu was fine. I'm fine. Shaking his head, Kinzu stood up and looked at the temporary chicken coop that looked a bit out of place in the yard of the villa. He couldn't help asking, where are Ryan and the others? Haven't they come back yet? Not yet. Putting away the weapon in her hand, Erica walked up and said with a smile. When they left, they took the lunch with them. I guess they won't be back until the evening. Is that so? Then please help me call Odom over. Waving his hand, Kinzu casually ordered, and walked towards the villa with a few guys. He also went to see what the other little guys were doing. Thank you for your reward and support, thank you. Chapter 1004. Galloping. This time, except for the tissue 3-color conoi that couldn't get out of the lake and the manta ray that stayed in the ocean, all the other pets were loaded on the plane and pulled over. This was also thanks to the white tiger and cheese, who were able to control their bodies, otherwise, it is estimated that another plane would not be able to accommodate them. Boss, are you planning to open a zoo? Erica, who followed behind Kinzu, looked at the small animals playing and basking in the sun on the grass in front of her, with a very strange expression. Although it is not surprising for rich people to keep a few pets, it is a bit abnormal if there are so many pets. Zoo? No. Kinzu waved his hand and said with a smile. That's too trivial. If I want to open an animal world. Animal world? Looking at Kinzu's back blankly, Erica didn't know whether this guy was joking or serious. Woof woof woof, woof woof woof. When Kinzu appeared in front of the group of guys, the other animals hadn't reacted yet, but a few little Alaskans had already happily stepped on their short legs and came to meet him. Hey, are you fat again or what? Squatting down, Kinzu stretched out his hands to knead the chubby little guys in front of him, with a teasing smile on his face. Woof woof, woof woof. As if they heard their owner saying that they were fat, the little guys looked at each other and immediately protested in dissatisfaction. How can I be called fat? Obviously, I am plump, okay? But Kinzu didn't eat that day. After touching the heads of each one, he said to himself, well, it seems that I can consider starting a weight loss plan. With a whoosh sound, Betty, who was originally running towards this side with a big mouth, suddenly braked and turned around to run. It was too familiar with this word. Moreover, every time it heard it, it would not end well. Stop right there. Seeing the guy's look, Kinzu couldn't help but twitch his mouth twice, and scolded loudly. Run another step, and dinner will be cut in half. Crunch. With a big grin, Betty pretended to look at Kinzu pitifully, as if to say if you don't give me food, I will cry for you to see. Can you be a little more promising? Kinzu rolled his eyes at the guy and couldn't help but laugh and scolded. Don't worry, if I don't help you lose weight, Fatty will die. Yes, Kinzu has completely given up the plan to make this greedy brown bear lose weight. There is no way, who lets him grow up now? Besides, how can a brown bear not be fat? However, Alaska is different. Looking down at the chubby little guys under his feet, Kinzu covered his face helplessly. It seems that these guys are also considered new species, right? Helplessly sending these guys to play by themselves, Kinzu looked at his other pets one by one. For example, Jerry and his wife Xiaohong were sitting on the pine tree watching the fun, or the little lop-eared rabbit was slowly nibbling on the grass, or the little silverback gorilla that refused to leave. Well, Kinzu, who had seen the real size of this guy, really couldn't treat it as a harmless little gorilla. Shilulu. Just when Kinzu wanted to go forward and get close to this uninvited little gorilla, a loud hissing interrupted his action. Xiaobai. Standing up in surprise, Kinzu looked in the direction of the hissing sound, and sure enough, he saw a white figure like lightning, approaching him quickly. Ha ha, little guy, it seems that you have recovered quite quickly, right? Looking up and down at the energetic Arabian horse in front of him, Kinzu felt indescribably happy. Although Ryan and the others didn't bring their mounts, how could he not bring his mount? Just based on the name of the Fergana horse, which is well known in China, it is worth Kinzu to bring it here from afar. However, this guy is indeed very capable on the ground, but in the sky, he seems to be afraid of heights. Although the mobile stable Kinzu prepared for it is very luxurious and comfortable, this guy is still a little depressed after arriving at the ranch. However, I didn't expect that this guy would recover after just one night. Shilulu. Shaking his big head, Xiaobai kept turning around in front of Kinzu, as if showing off his strong body. Okay, I know you were in good health. Smiling and touching the soft mane on Xiaobai's body, Kinzu pulled it to the stable. Since you were fine, let's go for a walk. Shilulu. Hearing that they were going to take a walk, Xiaobai ran ahead excitedly without waiting for Kinzu to pull it away. This guy. Shaking his head helplessly, Kinzu waved to Erica behind him and said with a smile. You go ahead and do your work. I'll be back after I take my horse for a walk. Okay, boss. Erica agreed and turned around without hesitation and walked into the villa. For now, the area around the villa is still very safe. After all, the sisters had cleaned up the area early in the morning. Gee, with shouts, a tall and white horse, facing the sun, galloped across the vast pasture like lightning. Riding on Xiaobai, feeling the wind whistling past his ears, Qin Zhu felt a sense of comfort for no reason, and even the depression that had been suppressed in his heart for a long time dissipated a lot. The ranch was bought by someone abruptly. If Qin Zhu said that he didn't feel uncomfortable, he would be lying. Although the price they offered was high enough and he didn't really need the ranch, it couldn't cover up the result of being kicked out. However, none of those guys have simple identities, so what can he do? Whether it is the prince's or the president's son-in-law, which one can he shake? You know, apart from the inherited property, he is just an ordinary college student from the other side of the ocean without any connections or background. Except for Bud Hill, who is now dead or alive, and the system in his mind that is dormant, Qin Zhu doesn't even know how he can ask for help. In this capitalist society, although money can buy everything, it can also make people crazy. A billionaire with no background, he is a good piece of fact in the eyes of those with ulterior motives. If it weren't for the existence of the system, Qin Zhu even doubted whether he dared to face it all alone. Thank you for your reward and support, thank you. Chapter 1005 Trouble Again. Hey, boss, you're looking for me? When Qin Zhu rode Xiaobai for a while and returned to the villa, Odin had been standing at the door for a while. Why didn't he go in? Nonsense, even Qin Zhu was kicked out by the women in the villa, so how could he go in? Besides, seeing that they were packing up, Odin was embarrassed to go in and cause trouble. Well, let's talk here. Looking into the house and seeing that they were still packing up, Qin Zhu didn't even hesitate and took Odin to the temporary chicken coop. Oh broom, look here. Pointing to where the chickens were, Qin Zhu gestured and said, go find some materials and help me build a chicken coop here. Otherwise, if it rains, they will have nowhere to stay. Chicken coop. Nodding gently, Odin looked around and frowned. Boss, do you want to make it mobile? Otherwise, the water problem will be difficult to solve. This, you can do it yourself. Just don't kill these chickens. Touching his nose, Qin Zhu simply handed all the chickens to Odin. Although he thought the meat of chickens was delicious, he was not very good at raising chickens. Okay, I know. Nodding readily, Odin looked at Qin Zhu in front of him, and his expression suddenly became a little tangled. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Qin Zhu saw this and looked at this guy helplessly. From the first contact, Qin Zhu found that this guy's character was a bit slow. Well, of course, although it seemed like he was taking too long to Qin Zhu's point of view, in layman's terms, he was being too cautious. This, boss, is what you asked me to announce last time. I've already told everyone. Looking at Qin Zhu with some trepidation, Odin said softly. Oh? How is it? What's the result? Hearing that it was about the ranch, Qin Zhu also perked up and asked excitedly, how many have left? This, looking at Qin Zhu, Odin couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat from his forehead. He really didn't understand why Qin Zhu had to tempt them to leave when those cowboys clearly had no intention of leaving. Even if Qin Zhu brought some people with him, if they all ran away, could they manage such a large ranch with just a few people? What's wrong? Seeing this guy actually in a daze, Qin Zhu couldn't help but urge him. Speak up, how many people have left? 8 have already left. Odin looked at Qin Zhu helplessly. Boss, if you keep going like this, the ranch will not be able to operate. Only 8. Qin Zhu muttered to himself and shook his head. It's okay, wait until those who should leave have left, then we will go to recruit people. But, no buts, Qin Zhu interrupted directly with a wave of his hand. Oh broom, you just do your own thing, as long as there are cowboys who want to leave, you ask the ranch finance department to pay me their salaries, not a penny less. Okay, boss, then I'll go and get busy first. Sighing deeply, Odin said hello and walked back the way he came with a staggering step. He knew very well that he didn't have many good days left as the ranch manager. After those cowboys got used to it, it would definitely be time for him to step down. As for whether he could stay on the ranch in the future, it would probably depend on the result of this matter and whether Qin Zhu could be satisfied. Not to mention Odin, even Zumengyu and Diva couldn't understand why Qin Zhu had to do this. Husband, even if you fire everyone, don't we still have to recruit people? It's so troublesome to go back and forth. Hearing Qin Zhu talking about what happened just now, Zumengyu, who was cleaning up that villa, couldn't help but stop what she was doing and looked over with some confusion. In her opinion, this behavior was just as boring as looking for trouble. No, wife, you don't understand. Shaking his fingers, Kinzu put on a sly smile. You'll know in a few days. Humph, just keep it a secret. Speechlessly rolling her eyes, Zhu Mengyo no longer paid attention to Kinzu, turned around and continued to fiddle with her vase. Seeing this, Kinzu's smile was inconvenient on his face, but he was secretly thinking in his heart. Since he has come here and will stay here permanently, he must let the neighbors around see our methods. There is a saying that there is only a thief who can steal for 1,000 days, but there is no one who can guard against thieves for 1,000 days. After all, he was not as famous as the Moore family. If he rashly bought such a large ranch, it would inevitably attract the attention of those who had ulterior motives. Thinking of this, Kinzu looked around and waved at Dale. What's wrong, boss? Dale subconsciously kept a certain distance from Kinzu after walking out of the villa, and then asked. Nothing, just did you bring all your weapons? Without caring about the little thoughts of this girl, Kinzu looked at the female bodyguards busy inside and outside the house, and said with a smile, our safety is in your hands. If there is a need for weapons, we still need to equip them as soon as possible. That's not necessary. We still have enough weapons. Dale shook her head slightly and looked at Kinzu. Are there any troubles? Do you need me to solve them? Not yet. Kinzu spread his hands helplessly. However, after a while, some people may not like us. Is it serious? Frowning, Dale looked at Kinzu in front of him and suddenly felt that she had made a wrong decision to be a bodyguard for this guy. Why did people not like him wherever he went? It shouldn't be serious. Touching his nose, Kinzu was not sure whether there was any cowboy gang behind these guys. Then it might be serious. Shrugging, Dale stretched out his hand. Take the money, I'm going to buy some equipment. How much? Kinzu raised his eyebrows and looked at Dale with interest. This girl was so direct for the first time. Frowning, Dale ignored Kinzu's slightly meaningful eyes, calculated a little, and then said, 500,000. Okay, I'll have someone transfer it to you later. Nodding, Kinzu agreed very straightforwardly. He didn't ask Dale what she was going to buy with 500,000, nor did he ask her if the money was enough. Since she has already asked, I just need to satisfy her. Looking at Dale's slender back as she walked away, Kinzu smiled and took out his phone to call Jennifer. Although he also has 500,000 inches cash, how can it be transferred easily? Chapter 1006. Buying a plane. After getting the money, Dale just said hello to Kinzu and drove out directly. As for where to go? Sorry, she didn't mean to tell Kinzu at all. However, looking at the back of Night the 15th going away, Kinzu felt that something should be put on the agenda. What? Going to buy a plane? When Zhu Mengyo knew Kinzu's idea, her eyebrows couldn't help but frowned. Husband, we don't need to go far now, isn't it a bit wasteful to buy a plane? What's more, we don't even have a runway. Don't worry about that. Kinzu shook his head disapprovingly at Zhu Mengyo's worries. Plane is not cabbage. After we place an order, it would be good if they can deliver it within a month. By the time, any kind of runway can be built. That's true. Zhu Mengyo nodded slightly after hearing this, and looked at Kinzu helplessly. Since you already have a plan, I won't say anything. When are you going? Tomorrow. Kinzu took 2 steps forward, gently put his arm around Zhu Mengyo's slender waist, and said with a smile, once we buy the plane, we can take our own plane back to China, and it will be more convenient to bring some things with us. Is it more convenient to bring your pets? She rolled her eyes at Kinzu coquettishly. Zhu Mengyo was also very curious whether this guy's love was a bit overflowing. It would be fine to raise a few small animals as companions, but this guy is so good that he wants to open a zoo. Wife, don't you like them? Look how smart they are. Pointing to the few little Alaskans playing around Betty, Kinzu chuckled and said, especially those guys, they look like their mother. Kinzu, say it again. Zhu Mengyo, who didn't think anything of the first half of the sentence, was furious when she heard the second half. What do you mean by look like its mother? Am I as fat as them? What? I didn't say anything. Facing the aggressive Zhu Mengyo, Kinzu touched his head and pretended to be stupid. HMPH, you dare to complain about my fatness, I'll crush you to death. After hitting Kinzu with her little fist, Zhu Mengyo stood up and rushed over without waiting for him to react. Hey, wife, it's still daytime, don't be anxious, don't be anxious. The sky in Montana, just like its nickname Land of the Sky, is always so clear and bright. Lying on the recliner in the yard of the villa, Kinzu narrowed his eyes and looked at the sky without blinking, wondering what he was thinking. Boss, have some fruit. Looking at Kinzu, who had been standing on the lawn without moving for half an afternoon, Eva, who had just finished cleaning the room, went to the kitchen to wash some fruits, sliced them and brought them over. Where did this apple come from? Kinzu came back to his senses and looked at the peeled and sliced apples on the fruit plate, wondering. I remember we didn't bring these things, did we? Of course not. We wouldn't be stupid enough to bring such consumables that are not easy to store. Eva smiled slightly and looked at Kinzu, who was full of doubts, and explained. These are sent by Odom. They are all wild fruits picked from the ranch forest. There are wild fruits on the ranch? Kinzu shook his head dumbly. He couldn't imagine that there were so many miscellaneous things on this ranch mainly engaged in animal husbandry. Of course, it would be abnormal if there were none for such a large area, okay? Shrugging her shoulders, Eva squatted on a bench and sat next to Kinzu, looking at him with a faint smile on her face. I'm going back to school tomorrow. Will you miss me? So soon? Kinzu was stunned and raised his hand to check the date. It turned out that this girl had been back for several days without realizing it. Yes, the professor has called several times. Pursing her lips, Eva's expression was a little disappointed. If she didn't go to school, even if Kinzu was rich, he probably wouldn't want her as a student. It's okay, a semester will pass quickly. Seeing Eva's depressed expression, Kinzu couldn't help but smile and comfort her. But, it will take a long time. Pouting her lips, Eva looked at the man beside her and asked again. Clean, will you miss me? Of course, I will go to school to find you when I have time. Gently covering Eva's little hand, Kinzu was a little curious, wondering what happened to this girl today. Why did she become so sentimental? But, after you have a sister, will you still think of me? Feeling the warmth in Kinzu's palm, Eva held back this sentence for a long time, and finally swallowed it back. She didn't want to break this window paper yet. Kinzu didn't know that Eva had already discovered a little secret between him and Dale at this time. Seeing that she was not in a good mood, he just thought it was because she had to go to school. So, after sitting with her in the yard for a while, he stood up and went back to the house for fear of being caught by Zumengyo. Honey, what happened to Sister Eva? Did you bully her? I don't know if it was because she had been paying attention to the two of them, but when she saw Kinzu coming back, Zumengyo couldn't help but ask curiously. No, why would I bully her? Although Zumengyo's tone was very calm, Kinzu's heart couldn't help but lift up. Maybe it's because I have to go to school. It's normal to be a little unhappy, just like when we were kids. TSK, who is the same as you? After being said by Kinzu, Zumengyo was immediately unhappy. Think about it, I was a 3 good student, okay? Every time I went to school, I was the most active. Really? Kinzu looked at her with some suspicion and teased, going to school actively, isn't it to find friends to play with? It seemed that Kinzu had hit the mark. Zumengyo's face rarely blushed, and she couldn't help but roll her eyes at him coquettishly. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Go check on your sister. She's been upstairs all day, and I don't know what she's doing. Kinzu's head was a little big when he mentioned Kinru. This girl was a little unhappy when she came to see the house, and she got better after Kinzu's counseling. But I didn't expect that after moving in, this girl started again, and this time she just locked herself in the room and didn't come out. Okay, I'll go see what's wrong with her. Shaking his head, Kinzu raised his legs and walked upstairs. Okay, you go check it out, talk nicely, don't scare her. Zumengyo had no way to deal with this sister-in-law. She couldn't say anything or scold her, so she could only let Kinzu communicate. Moreover, there seemed to be a gap between the personalities of the two. However, this is also normal. After all, one is a night girl who grew up in the countryside, and the other is a young lady from a wealthy family. Oh, by the way, husband. Just as Kinzu was about to go upstairs to have a good talk with Kinru, Zumengyo seemed to remember something and asked hurriedly, where did you take Dale? Why hasn't she come back yet? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sin esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1007. Disappearance of Dale. Dale. Kinzu was obviously stunned by Zhu Mengyo's question, and looked at the watch on his wrist with some confusion. Strange, she hasn't come back yet? Of course, otherwise I would ask you. Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at this guy who asked knowingly, and didn't ask any more questions. She turned around and continued to pack her things. There are some things that Kinzu doesn't want to talk about, so she won't ask any more. However, it is obvious that Zhu Mengyo misunderstood this time. I didn't send her out, but she said she was going to buy something. Why hasn't she come back yet? Thinking that the things that Daya wanted to buy could not be bought through regular channels, then she might have gone to some dangerous black market. Kinzu couldn't sit still. Buy what? Zhu Mengyo looked at Kinzu curiously. Is it really not a secret? Hey, wife, what are you thinking about? Kinzu sat back on the sofa with a bit of a laugh and tears, and explained helplessly. I just went to buy some security things. Our ranch is so big and the wealth is so rich, so we must take good security measures. That's true. Nodding in agreement, Zhu Mengyo looked at the sky outside and said worriedly, you should call and ask. It's so late, she is a girl, don't let anything happen to her. Well, you're right, I'll call and ask. Kinzu didn't care to see Kinru, and took out his mobile phone to call Dale. However, what made Kinzu's heart sink was that Dale's phone was turned off. Turn off? Maybe it's out of battery? Zhu Mengyo's little brows also frowned. However, after all, she didn't know the specific situation, so she didn't think about the bad side of things. I don't know, I'll ask again. Shaking his head, Kinzu called Erica with a serious face. Boss, this is Erica. The call was quickly connected, and Erica's voice came into Kinzu's ears through the microphone, sounding so capable. Perhaps, this is the characteristic of a professional soldier. Shaking his head, Kinzu put aside the messy thoughts in his mind, and asked with a hint of expectation in his tone that he himself did not even notice. Erica, can you contact Dale now? Dale? Didn't she go shopping? Erica raised her wrist to check the time, and her brows frowned. Boss, wait a moment, I'll go ask. After leaving a word, there was no sound on the other end of the phone. Obviously she had already contacted someone. This guy, he does things in a hurry. Shaking his head, Kinzu put the phone aside and turned on the speaker. What did you say? Zhu Mengyo, who did not hear the specific situation, couldn't help but turn around and look at Kinzu. I don't know, wait until she asks. Shaking his head, Kinzu looked at the time, and his brows couldn't help but frown deeper. It's already past 7 in the evening. Logically, Dale should call back no matter what. Boss, I tried, but I can't contact Dale. Just as Kinzu was lost in thought, Erica's voice rang in the speakerphone. Still can't contact her? Kinzu stood up and said anxiously, come over first, let's go find this girl. Okay, boss. Erica agreed and hung up the phone. What's wrong? Still can't contact Dale? Zhu Mengyo, who was standing aside, also became anxious after hearing this. Why don't we call the police? There are surveillance cameras on the road, and they should be able to find Dale. Can't call the police. Kinzu shook his head and decisively rejected the proposal. What a joke. Knowing that Dale might be buying something from an unknown source, he called the police himself. What should I do? Seeing that Kinzu refused to call the police, Zhu Mengyo seemed to understand something and her expression became a little serious. It's okay, wife, you don't have to worry. Seeing Zhu Mengyo also worried, Kinzu couldn't help but smile and comforted. It's just buying some military surveillance cameras, it's not a big deal. Is that so? That's good. Zhu Mengyo shook her head helplessly after taking a deep breath. Husband, this is not our territory after all, so we should be careful when doing things. Of course, don't worry about this, I'm not the kind of person who messes around. Kinzu patted his chest and assured. You? It would be strange if I didn't mess around. Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at Kinzu unhappily, and stood up and walked upstairs. Let's not talk about you, I'll go see Xiaora, you can do it yourself. Well, you go see that girl first. Seeing Zhu Mengyo was so sensible and knew to take the initiative to avoid these things, Kinzu couldn't help but smile. There has always been an old saying in China that men are responsible for the outside world and women are responsible for the inside world. The meaning is very clear. When it comes to dealing with outsiders, it's better for women to get involved less. Even the queens of ancient times, who were highly respected, had to follow that bottom line that the harem should not interfere in politics. Boss, what's going on? What mission did Dale go on? A moment later, Erica, who came hurriedly, looked at Kinzu with curiosity. She didn't think that Kinzu would assign Dale any dangerous mission. But since it was not a dangerous mission, how could this girl lose contact? I also want to know what happened. Helplessly lying on the sofa, Kinzu briefly told Erica what happened today. No, if she just went shopping, she wouldn't turn off her phone. After frowning and thinking for a long time, Erica still shook her head helplessly. She couldn't figure out what went wrong. As for whether the phone might be out of power, Erica would not even think about it. For bodyguards like them, no matter what the situation is, they must ensure that they can contact their companions or employers in time. This is their first lesson. In this case, we can only wait for news. Rubbing his temples, Kinzu said helplessly. Waiting for news? Whose news? Erica looked at Kinzu in confusion. An information consulting company in Billings. Kinzu shrugged and looked at the time. They said they would give me news in an hour. It should be soon. As soon as he finished speaking, the phone Kinzu placed on the table suddenly rang. He looked at the number displayed on it. It was the phone number of the information consulting company he had just asked Jennifer for. It's really on time. I just hope it won't disappoint me. Kinzu muttered to himself and answered the phone decisively. Hello, this is Keen. Chapter 1008 Unknown Place. What? You found someone? Kinzu couldn't help but stand up after hearing the words coming from the other end of the phone. No, Mr. Keen. Seeing that Kinzu seemed to have misunderstood something, a man on the other end of the phone quickly explained. We just found Miss Dale's whereabouts. What do you mean? Kinzu frowned and asked in confusion. Since we have found her whereabouts, can't we find her? This, after hesitating for a while, the other end of the phone explained. It's like this, Mr. Clean, outsiders can't get in where Miss Dale is now, so we haven't found her yet. Outsiders can't get in. Kinzu frowned even more. Since you can't get in, how can you be sure that she is inside, and how can you be sure that she is safe? You know, her mobile phone is now turned off. Alas, this matter can't be explained for a while. As if there was something difficult to say, the man on the other end of the phone sighed. Mr. Clean, if you have time, let's meet and talk about it. Okay, tell me an address and I'll find you now. Without any hesitation, Kinzu agreed directly. After motioning Erica to find a piece of paper, Kinzu wrote down the other party's address and hung up the phone. Go and gather everyone, let's go here. Kinzu pointed at the note on the table, stood up, gave Erica an order, and went straight upstairs. Okay, boss. Although Kinzu's figure had disappeared at the stairs, Erica still agreed respectfully and went out to gather her sisters. Husband, what's wrong? Zumengyo, who was chatting with Kinru in the bedroom, looked at Kinzu who pushed the door open, with some confusion on her face. Wife, I have something to go out for, you should go to bed early tonight. As he said that, Kinzu looked at Kinru, smiled and walked forward, reaching out to touch the little girl's head. What's wrong? Is our little princess unhappy? No. Kinru pouted her lips, glanced at Zumengyo beside her, and said with a smile. How can I be unhappy with Sister Mengyo accompanying me? You are just sweet-mouthed. After glaring at the little girl, Zumengyo stood up and asked in confusion. Husband, where are you going so late? I went to find Dale, someone said they saw her. Seeing Zumengyo asking, Kinzu did not hide anything and told the story directly. Well, okay, then be careful on the road. Although she was a little worried about Kinzu's safety, Zumengyo had no reason to stop him from going out, not to mention that Dale was Eva's sister. Okay, how can I be in trouble? Smiling and pinching Zumengyo's little nose, Kinzu was affectionate with her for a while, until the little girl couldn't stand it anymore, then she came out of the room and returned to her bedroom. After entering the bedroom, Kinzu went straight to the gun cabinet, first picked up a thunder shotgun, and then took out an August from it. This is the third best-selling paratrooper submachine gun in the world. Whether it is single shot or continuous shooting, it ranks first among assault rifles. Boss, we're ready. Can we set off now? Erica's voice seemed to reveal a hint of murderous intent in the intercom. If something really happened to Dale, Kinzu believed that this girl would definitely massacre the whole family. Okay, I'll be down right away. After picking up the intercom and saying something, Kinzu stopped searching in the gun cabinet until he filled his backpack with a box of bullets. Since the weapons were ready, Kinzu didn't waste any time. After changing his clothes, he trotted downstairs. Boss. Seeing Kinzu coming down, the 12 fully armed women who were still sitting on the sofa stood up in unison. Well, not bad. With a satisfied look at the murderous women in front of him, Kinzu ordered, "Leave 2 to protect the house, and the rest of you come with me." "Okay, boss." After nodding, Erica turned around and looked at the group of people behind her, and casually nodded twice. "You, and you two stay to protect the wife and the young lady." "Ah? Us?" The 2 women chosen by Erica looked at each other, with disappointment on their faces that could not be concealed. For them, since they are bodyguards, it is their mission to follow Kinzu on missions. However, there is always a need for someone to stay behind to guard the house, and this task is not easy, so although the 2 were somewhat reluctant, they nodded and agreed. "Okay, let's go." Seeing this, Kinzu didn't say anything else. After nodding to the 2 women who stayed behind, he walked out of the villa directly. Boom. With the dull roar of the engine, the 2 pickup trucks drove out of the ranch one after the other and quickly headed towards the destination along the path. According to the address provided by the consulting company, their journey would take about an hour, so after getting in the car, Kinzu began to close his eyes and rest. After all, no one could predict the situation he would face later. "Boss, I seem to be familiar with this road." Erica was driving on the interstate highway, speeding towards the destination in the pickup truck. She looked at the map in her hand with a puzzled expression on her face. "What? You are familiar with it?" Kinzu, who was still resting with her eyes closed, sat up straight in an instant. Why did she feel familiar? Could it be that she had been here before when she was on a mission? A series of doubts flashed in Kinzu's mind, and finally turned into just one sentence. "Erica, think about it carefully. Why do you feel this place is so familiar?" Let me think about it carefully." Covering her head with one hand, Erica lay on her back in the seat and thought for a long time, but still got nothing. "No, I can't remember. It must have been too long." "Is that so?" "Forget it." After sighing, Kinzu forced himself to cheer up. He stared at the night outside the car window without blinking, and he didn't know what he was thinking. "I'm sorry, boss." Erica turned around awkwardly, but she didn't know how to explain. It's okay not to give people hope. At most, there is no hope. But now I gave people hope, but I killed it with my own hands. It seems a bit immoral. Crack, just when everyone was a little distracted, the pickup truck running at high speed suddenly braked. "Boss, it seems that someone is on guard ahead. Should we continue to move forward?" In the intercom, Elsa, who was driving a pickup truck in front, asked with some caution. "Someone is on guard? Where is this place?" Listening to Elsa's words, Kinzu's face inevitably showed a trace of nervousness, and he quickly signaled Erica to check the map. "It seems we are near our destination." After looking at the map, Erica leaned out of the window again, and her expression became a little unpredictable. "Boss, I know where this is." Chapter 1009 Black Market. "Where?" Hearing Erica's words, Kinzu immediately turned around and looked at her anxiously. There was no way. Based on the current situation, he suspected that Dale had been kidnapped. "Boss, if I remember correctly, this should be a black market," Erica said with certainty, staring at the night outside the car window. "Black market?" Kinzu frowned when he heard it. He was not unfamiliar with this term, or he had heard of it many times. Although this is an illegal place, there are still various black markets all over the country and even the world. As the name suggests, the black market refers to those places that specialize in black transactions. It may be weapons and ammunition, drugs and counterfeit currency, or even national treasures. All of these are possible. Anything that cannot be traded publicly can be sold on the black market. Because no one here will check your identity, and no one cares whether the source of those things is regular. How do you know this is a black market? Could it be? Kinzu looked at Erica suspiciously. That's right, Erica did not deny it and nodded readily. I came here to resupply ammunition when I was on a mission with Dale before. So, Dale's safety is not a problem? Kinzu asked with some worry. If there is no big change here from before, her safety is still guaranteed. That's good, that's good. Kinzu finally breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Erica's affirmative answer. Ding-ling-ling, the rapid ring of the mobile phone suddenly rang, making Kinzu, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, involuntarily tense again. Hello, I'm Keen. Kinzu picked up the phone and just said one sentence, but was interrupted by the other party. Hi, Mr. Keen, get off the car, I have seen you. Serious? Hearing the man's voice coming from the microphone, Kinzu's eyes subconsciously moved to the window. Where are you? Here, right in front of your car. As he spoke, a thin man wearing a black windbreaker and a black wide-brimmed hat with half of his face pressed down by the brim walked out from the shadow in front of the car. Okay, I'll be right down. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu was about to open the door and get out of the car, but was stopped by Erica beside him. Wait, boss, let's go out and take a look first. Without waiting for Kinzu to answer, Erica had already picked up the intercom and whispered a few words. Soon, in Kinzu's sight, several fully armed female bodyguards, holding submachine guns in their hands, walked quickly towards the man. The man seemed to have expected this sudden change. Although he was almost carried into the car by the female bodyguards, he still didn't panic at all. Mr. Clean, our people have confirmed that Miss Dale is currently safe. When the car doors closed, the man who had not spoken a word said with a very respectful smile. Oh? Your people went in? Kinzu asked in surprise, pointing to the front. Of course. The man nodded affirmatively and chuckled. Mr. Clean, although the conditions here are harsh, it is not a big problem for a professional information consulting company to handle it. That's true. After nodding slightly to indicate that he understood, Kinzu suddenly asked, in this case, I wonder if you can let us in as well? The man, who was originally smiling, froze in an instant, rubbed his hands awkwardly, and smiled awkwardly. Mr. Keen is joking. If there were only one or two of you, it would be fine, but so many of you, and all of you are carrying weapons. Although this guy didn't say it explicitly, the meaning was already very clear. I can take you in if you are one or two people, but with so many of you, there is no need to think about it. Is that so? Then the two of us will go in. Kinzu smiled and pointed at himself and Erica. In fact, he didn't expect so many people to be able to go in, especially when they were fully armed. After all, this is a place where it is illegal. If people think that the police are here, it will be a lot of fun. If things go wrong, a small-scale war might even break out. That's absolutely no problem. After hearing Kinzu say that only the two of them would go in, the man opposite immediately patted his chest and assured, Mr. Clean, wait a few minutes, I'll be back soon. Okay, thank you for your help. Nodding and watching the guy leave, Kinzu realized that he was not even as good as the other person. Look at what happened. I chatted for so long that I even forgot to ask for his name. Haha, boss, even if I asked, I would only get a code name. Erica on the side smiled and shook her head. Huh. Why? Kinzu looked at him curiously. It's just a name. What's the big deal? Because it's a very important thing for them. Seeing Kinzu's confused look, Erica had to explain patiently. Boss, you have to know that they say they are consulting companies, but in fact, they are the same as private detectives, and they are all the kind that die in the light. Is that so? Erica didn't need to explain anymore. Kinzu understood the reason just by hearing the name of private detective. In fact, it's very simple. The main thing for private detectives is secrecy. If you make everyone know you, how can you investigate others? As soon as they see you, they know you were a detective. What's the point of playing? Boss, he's here. Kinzu, who was wandering in space, heard Erica's words and instantly collected his thoughts. Sir, how is it? Of course, no problem, Mr. Clean, follow me. Although his breath was a little uneven, the man still smiled and nodded, turned around and led the way. Boss, follow me. Before Kinzu got out of the car, Erica had already opened the door and jumped out. She looked around and saw that there was no danger, so she signaled Kinzu to get out of the car. Although Kinzu felt that this dedicated female bodyguard was a little too cautious, he didn't say anything, but just followed silently. After all, life is only once, and there is no chance to start over. Soon, under the leadership of the man from the consulting company, several people came to an iron gate. Kinzu stopped and took advantage of the gap between the man and the guard to look up and carefully look at the entrance of the black market. Simple and primitive. This is the first impression of this black market that Kinzu gave. Although the iron gate is called an iron gate, Kinzu can see at a glance that the construction materials of this gate are still mainly wood. The wire fence around the black market seems to be to save time, and the distance between the two stakes is far apart. In this way, the two pulled wires seem to be the same with or without them. Erica, are you sure this is the black market where you don't have to worry about safety? Chapter 1010 Finding Dale. Boss, I can assure you that you don't need to worry about your safety. Shrugging her shoulders, Erica pointed to the thin iron wires that seemed to be drooping helplessly, and said with a smile, Don't underestimate these thin iron wires. There are high voltage electricity of up to 10,000 volts on them. How much? Kinzu paused and looked at Erica beside him in surprise. Boss, you heard it right, it's 10,000 volts. Erica nodded, her expression was very serious. Okay. With a wry smile, Kinzu nodded and said helplessly, if this is the case, plus the guard post outside, there is really no need to worry about safety. Just kidding, 10,000 volts of high voltage current, if the power supply is not turned off, let alone the police, even the special forces dare not pass through it. Once they touch it, even God can't save them. However, no matter how safe this place is, it can't cover up the fact that it is simple. Because after Kinzu came in, he found that this so-called black market was actually built with a few rows of simple board houses. At the entrance of each door, there is a table, and on the table are the things that this store wants to sell. Hey, sir, do you need weapons? Can you take a look at the Maxim heavy machine gun? Come on, man, look here, I have a Gatling large caliber rocket launcher, very cheap. Brother, look at what I have here, the latest rocket launcher produced in the United States, one shot can turn over even a tank. Walking on a simple street, looking at the lively scene on both sides like a vegetable market, Kinzu couldn't help but curl his lips. Isn't this mysterious? Why is it so mysterious outside? Kinzu originally thought that after entering here, everyone was wearing a black scarf and masked, as if they were afraid of being recognized. What happened? One by one, they shouted, as if they were afraid that others would not know that they were selling legal products. Ha, boss, you think too much. If everything is so mysterious, how can we sell the things? Shaking her head, Erica chuckled twice and explained. The black market only provides a platform for everyone to buy and sell freely, but whether the things can be sold or whether you can buy what you want depends on your luck. Okay, it seems that I think too much. Kinzu finally retracted his eyes that were looking around after touching his nose with a smile. There was no way, who made him have never come into contact with these things before, it was normal to be curious. Mr. Clean, come this way. After making a phone call, the man leading the way in front turned around and walked to the other side. Our people have been following Miss Dale. She is now choosing weapons in a weapons store. Choosing weapons? Kinzu muttered to himself. Although he had to tossing for so long because of looking for this girl, he still felt a little warm in his heart. After all, she came here alone for her own safety. Boss. Why are you here? However, before Kinzu could find Dale, the girl came to him. Needless to say, the girl must have noticed that someone was following her, so she came to counter-reconnaissance. What else are you talking about? What time is it now? Kinzu, who came back to his senses from the astonishment, glared at the girl unhappily. You've been out for so long, don't you know to call home? I. Dale, who was a little dissatisfied because she was being followed, was stunned when she heard the words, and stammered, not knowing what to say. Indeed, she was used to being alone these years, so even if she thought about it, she didn't have this habit. What's more, before coming in, her mobile phone was turned off. Okay, what do you want to buy? Did you buy it? Seeing that Dale was silent, Kinzu couldn't say anything in front of outsiders, so he could only change the subject first. Not yet. Just when I was about to talk, I found someone following me. Dale pointed to a guy beside her with some embarrassment. She followed this guy to find me. Ahem, Mr. Clean, what do you think? Although they were followed, the two guys from the consulting company did not feel embarrassed. Anyway, the task had been completed, and getting the remaining payment was the most important thing. Okay, you go back first, and someone will transfer the remaining payment to you later. Kinzu waved his hand and did not dwell on this point. He let them go happily. Okay, then I'll trouble you, Mr. Clean. The leading man nodded with a smile and handed over a business card very respectfully. If you need anything in the future, please feel free to contact us, Mr. Clean. As long as we have money, there are few things we can't do. Yes. After a few casual responses, Kinzu said with some amusement after they walked away. These two guys can't even escape from your tracking, Dale, and you still say there's nothing they can't do. This is really, although Kinzu didn't say the rest of his words, Dale and Erica heard the meaning clearly and couldn't help but smile. Boss, don't mind it. With a faint smile on her face, Dale understood them quite well and explained. They are in this business. If they don't make their words more confident, no one will go to them. Yeah, that's true. Kinzu nodded and sighed sincerely. If it weren't for Jennifer's recommendation, I wouldn't have known that there is such a strong company in Billings. This time, Kinzu didn't say anything sarcastic. He really thought that the strength of this company was quite strong. Apart from anything else, being able to figure out Dale's whereabouts within a few hours and being able to let them into the black market easily proves this point. However, the strength of their employees still needs to be improved. After sighing, Kinzu did not continue to dawdle, and turned his head to look at Dale beside him. What else do you want to buy? Let's go buy it together. Okay. Nodding subconsciously, Dale glanced at Kinzu. Boss, their store is not here, we have to go to the other side from here. Then let's go, why are you looking at me? Since the outsiders have left, Kinzu has no need to hide anything. After glaring at Dale in anger, he stretched out his enlushang claws, and with a snap, hit a certain place that was raised. Ah! What are you doing? Being suddenly attacked by Kinzu, especially in front of her best friend, Dale was immediately a little embarrassed and angry. However, when she turned around and met Kinzu's half-smiley eyes, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat, and she subconsciously took a few steps back. Boss, you, don't come over here. Thank you Fayin for the 3,700 book coins reward, and thank you Maya for the reward support, thank you. Chapter 1011 Two powerful weapons. In front of Erica, Kinzu gave Dale a few small beatings, and then followed the red-faced big horse to the door of a store with several heavy machine guns placed at the door. Boss, this is the store, I'm going to get 2 machine guns back. Dale stopped and turned around. She looked at Erica embarrassedly at first, and when she saw that she didn't react, she glared at Kinzu fiercely. Get 2 machine guns? Is it necessary? Frowning, Kinzu ignored Dale's harmless little white eyes and looked at her with some doubt. Of course it is necessary. Dale's answer was so decisive. It seemed that if Kinzu didn't buy it, she would have paid for it herself. However, seeing Kinzu's puzzled look, Dale thought for a moment and explained. Boss, the location of our villa is actually very good. It is backed by the foot of the mountain. As long as we set up 2 machine guns on it and guard the other 3 sides, we don't have to worry about them raiding the villa. Hey, Dale, do you have any misunderstandings? Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said with a bit of a smile. Didn't I say it? It is very likely that there are only a few hooligans come in, at most a few gang members. We just need to pay a little attention. There is no need to toss so much. Boss, your safety is our responsibility. Dale looked at Kinzu unhappily, and his words were very impolite. So, please don't interfere with our actions casually, because if something goes wrong, we need to be responsible. Well, okay, I reserve my opinion. He shrugged helplessly. Kinzu really had no good way to deal with this arrogant foreign horse. After unifying the opinions, Dale didn't waste any time and went straight up to negotiate with a bearded white man in the store. Taking advantage of this time, Kinzu looked at the 2 powerful-looking guns in front of him. However, as a pseudo-military fan, Kinzu studied them for a long time, but apart from concluding that they were machine guns, he had no idea what type of gun they were. He even didn't know whether they were light machine guns or heavy machine guns. Touching his nose in shame, Kinzu turned his head and looked at Erica. Erica was a little confused when being stared at by Kinzu, but when she followed Kinzu's line of sight and saw the 2 shiny black weapons, she finally understood. Ha, boss, don't you recognize these 2 machine guns? Erica's beautiful big eyes were almost narrowed into a slit as she looked at Kinzu with interest. She really didn't expect that her boss could be so cute. Hehe, well, now that you know it, why don't you introduce it to me? Are you waiting for your salary to be deducted? Seeing what he was thinking, Kinzu's face was a little hot. He didn't dare to look at her, so he could only pretend to scold her. Hehe, okay, boss, I'll introduce it to you. Pursing her lips, Erica suppressed the smile on her face and introduced it seriously. Boss, you should have heard of the one on the left, the Milligrams 24 general-purpose machine gun, which was developed and put into service by Germany in 1942. It was basically developed based on weapons using 7.92mm bullets, and was prepared to replace the Milligrams 34 general-purpose machine gun. However, in the end, the 2 machine guns were used together until the end of the war. And its biggest feature is its extremely fast firing rate. The theoretical firing rate is 800 to 900 rounds per minute, and the maximum firing rate can reach 1,500 rounds per minute. 1,500 rounds per minute. Listening to Dale's introduction, Kinzu suddenly felt a chill on his back. What does it mean to be able to fire more than 1,000 rounds of bullets in a minute? After firing this round, the bullet should be denser than raindrops, right? Yes, the maximum firing rate of this machine gun can indeed reach 1,500 rounds per minute. Dale, who had returned at some point, interrupted to explain. At the time, there is no need to think about accuracy at all. It's good enough if we can avoid shooting bullets into the sky. Ah, you're back. Touching his nose, Kinzu looked at the shop owner who had returned to the house with some doubt. Did you guys reach an agreement so quickly? What else? Shrugging his shoulders, Dale looked at another heavy machine gun with a satisfied smile on his face. The Milligrams 24 general purpose machine gun is good, but in comparison, I value this one more. This one. Following Dale's line of sight, Kinzu saw a heavy machine gun with a slender barrel mounted on a tripod. Unlike the Milligrams 24 general purpose machine gun, this machine gun is obviously a heavy machine gun, because Kinzu felt that he couldn't lift it by himself. Yes, this one is the M2 Browning 12.7mm caliber heavy machine gun. Its most common use is to set up fire positions and military vehicles. At this point, Dale looked back at Kinzu, with a bright smile on his face. For example, tanks. Although he had expected that this thing must not be a simple thing, Kinzu couldn't help swallowing his saliva after listening to Dale's introduction. It turned out that this was the machine gun on the top of the tank. Okay, boss, let's go. Seeing that Kinzu seemed to be scared by herself, Dale couldn't help but clench her fists, and the smile on her face was particularly bright. Humph, you still bully me in front of Erica, I'll scare you. Go. Are you not going to buy it? Following behind Dale, Kinzu couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw that she didn't take the two heavy machine guns. Not buying. Why not? Blinking in confusion, Dale chuckled and explained. All here are cash on delivery. I just need to leave my address and deposit. Speechless, Kinzu finally understood that she was determined to get the two heavy machine guns back. Although as a man, he also yearned for the two big killers, but they were two-time bombs after all. If someone with ulterior motives used them to do something, then he would be really finished. Ignoring Kinzu's mumbling, Dale led the way, Erica followed behind, and the three walked out along this simple street. Hey, what's that? Kinzu, who was still worried about his life, couldn't move away when his eyes accidentally swept past the door of a store. Huh. Boss, what's wrong? Hearing the voice, Dale turned his head, looked in the direction of Kinzu's gaze, and couldn't help laughing. Don't tell me, you want that? Of course, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Kinzu nodded decisively, and pulled Dale towards the store next door. When they got closer, Kinzu was about to speak, but was stopped by Dale. Shaking his head slightly, Dale smiled and said, Okay, boss, leave this to me. Chapter 1012. 10 boxes of bullets? As the largest continent in the northwest of the United States, the weather in Montana can be said to be very changeable. When Kinzu and his team came out, there were still many stars in the sky, but when they came out of the black market, it was already cloudy and rainy, and the trend was getting worse. Damn, this damn weather, why is it so cold? Being drenched by the drizzle and blown by the cold wind, Kinzu couldn't help but shiver. Although it was already April or May, the temperature here at night was only about 2 or 3 degrees, and it was often below zero. Boss, do you regret coming here? Wrapping up their clothes on his body, Dale took Kinzu and ran towards the night the 15th he drove, asking with some sarcasm. Unlike Kinzu, Dale, who had been here before on a mission, knew Montana better than him, so the clothes he wore and going out were also cold-proof. To be honest, it's true. Wrapping up the thin compact uniform on his body, Kinzu's face was full of bitter smiles. After staying in Boston for a long time, he couldn't stand the sudden change in temperature. Hee, you'll get used to it. After all, the air here is much better and very suitable for retirement. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, Dale's tone was particularly strange when she mentioned the word retirement. Obviously, even if she was not very active by nature, she couldn't understand why Kinzu would give up the good ranch in Boston and go to this corner to buy a ranch. Of course, these had nothing to do with her. The thing she was most dissatisfied with was that in this way, she and her sister would be too far away from her father, who made her worry. What if the guy got addicted to gambling again and went to gamble again? Whenever she thought of this problem, Dale wanted to pull Kinzu over and beat him up. So, this is also one of the reasons why her attitude towards Kinzu was not very good. Maybe. Although he could hear the hidden meaning in Dale's words, Kinzu shrugged helplessly and teased in a relaxed manner. Dale, you should know that this place is not only suitable for elderly care, but also for raising children. As he spoke, Kinzu's eyes were still unscrupulous, scanning back and forth over her perfect body, looking indescribably vulgar. Humph, you should let Zhu raise a child for you, and don't forget to think about other things. Being stared at by Kinzu's fiery eyes, Heidi felt a numbness all over her body. Especially when she saw the smirk at the corner of Kinzu's mouth, Dale felt even more uncomfortable, as if the guy's eyes were no longer restricted by the clothes, and he directly passed through her body and looked at her most private place. Really? Are you sure? Kinzu, who got on the passenger seat, waited until Dale fastened her seatbelt, then leaned over and said with a sly smile, "Why do I remember that we didn't seem to take any safety measures that day?" "What? You, Dale, who was originally just blushing and uncomfortable, was so anxious that she almost jumped up when she heard this. She pointed at Kinzu and couldn't say a word. "What's wrong with me? Don't thank me, or I'll be embarrassed." As if to vent his anger caused by this girl tonight, Kinzu saw her leaning on the seat with her eyes closed, and with a big mouth moving, he simply kissed her. "Ah. What are you doing?" Dale, who was weak all over, tried her best to push Kinzu away. "Boss, if you do this again, I'll be angry." Before she finished speaking, Kinzu, who was still unsatisfied, attacked her again. "You. Boss, you can't. I'm going to sue you." The repeated attacks turned a cold-faced female bodyguard who was pressed under Kinzu into a puddle of mud, the kind that couldn't even be helped up. "How about it? Little Dale, are you convinced?" Kinzu touched his lip that was bitten by Dale and looked at her with a smirk. He waited for her to refuse again, and then he pounced on her. "I'm convinced. Isn't it enough that I'm convinced?" Really, there was a hint of tears in Dale's voice at this moment. She was really desperate. She couldn't fight him, and she couldn't scold him, so she could only watch herself being conquered by Kinzu bit by bit. It would have been better if it had been done earlier, so we wouldn't have wasted so much time. After licking her lips with satisfaction, Kinzu let her go and sat up straight with a smirk on his face. HMPH, with a cold snort, Dale sat up and straightened her clothes. Just as she was about to start the car, she suddenly remembered something and asked hurriedly, "By the way, boss, I haven't asked you yet, why do you need so many bullets? Sniper rifles don't consume that many bullets." "Of course it's through practice." Kinzu shrugged helplessly and said with a smile, "Don't people say that good snipers are basically fed with bullets? But, aren't you having too many?" Thinking back to the last order Kinzu placed, Dale still had an urge to hit someone. It would be fine if you bought a sniper rifle, but you actually bought 10 boxes. Even if you calculate it as 1,000 rounds per box, that's more than 10,000 bullets. Oh, God, am I dreaming? 10,000 bullets, even if you shoot continuously all day long, it will not be used up in a short time. Hey, there's no rush, let's take our time. Kinzu didn't think much of Dale's worry. He just bought it because he liked it. He didn't expect this girl to react so strongly. That's right, just when he was about to leave the black market, Kinzu suddenly saw a sniper rifle, so he asked Dale to go and buy it. Moreover, this sniper rifle has a nice name, Cannon. In the silent night, several dazzling lights suddenly appeared on the dark interstate highway, and the speed was getting faster and faster. "Dale, you said that the rain will affect their delivery speed." The rain was still drizzling outside the car window, as if it didn't want to stop so soon. Kinzu was bored and had to chat casually with Dale, the girl he had bullied. Maybe, who knows? Listening to Kinzu's question, Dale agreed casually without even raising her head. Now the rain is getting heavier and the visibility is getting lower and lower. She doesn't want to be distracted at this time. After all, although the interstate highway is easy to drive, it is not easy to avoid the animals that cross the road from time to time. Every time at this time, Dale will slow down the speed of the car, and will not speed up again until they have all passed. Not to mention Kinzu, who was sitting in the car next to her, even she herself wanted to get off the car at this time, catch these guys who did not obey their traffic rules and take them back one by one. As for whether to steam or braise them, it depends on her mood at the time. Chapter 1013 Kinzu's Worry. Beep beep, with a burst of rapid car horns, the Tycoon ranch, which was shrouded in the silent night, suddenly became lively. "Open the door, it's the boss and the others who are back." The two female bodyguards who stayed in the ranch villa confirmed the identity of the visitors and then opened the door of the villa. "Husband, you are finally back." Where is Dale? Is everything okay? As night the 15th stopped at the door, Kinzu just opened the car door and got out of the car, and Zumengyo came down from the steps at the door to greet him. Of course it's okay. Pointing to the side, Kinzu said proudly. With me here, how could there be any problems? You were just showing off. Zumengyo gave Kinzu a coquettish look, and ignored this self-praising guy, and walked towards Dale. How is it? Did you encounter any problems? You made us so anxious. No, I'm fine. Facing Zumengyo's concern, Dale inexplicably felt a little guilty for some reason. Especially when she saw her concerned look, Dale's slightly stiff face was a little hot. Because she could tell that Zumengyo's concern was definitely not fake. It's good that you're okay. Let's go in and talk. It's a bit cold outside. Wrapping up her pajamas, Zumengyo took Dale's little hand and walked into the villa. She didn't pay attention to Kinzu from beginning to end. This girl, if she doesn't clean up for a day, she will go up to the roof and tear off the tiles. Touching his nose, Kinzu muttered to himself awkwardly under the gaze of the female bodyguards. Of course, whether these female bodyguards who have been together for a while believe what he said is another matter. In the early morning, when Kinzu opened his eyes from his sleep, it was just dawn. I don't know why, during this period of time, Kinzu felt that his body was getting better and better, and the sleep time was getting less and less. Sometimes he didn't sleep all night, and he was energetic the next day, without feeling sleepy at all. Although he didn't know why all this happened, it was good for him after all. So after worrying for a few days, Kinzu stopped worrying after seeing that there were no side effects. After stretching, Kinzu lifted the quilt, got out of bed quietly, and then covered Zumengyo who was still asleep on the bed, and then went to the bathroom to wash up. Compared with his increasingly healthy body, Zumengyo's small body was a bit dangerous. After all, Zumengyo had never experienced any enhancement, and had to endure someone's endless tossing every night. It was not easy to hold on until now. However, Kinzu was helpless about this. He really wanted to enhance Zumengyo, but the consequences were really not what Kinzu wanted to see. Especially looking at the changes in Eva and Dale, Kinzu was even more unwilling to do so. Especially Dale, if she changed to her previous personality, facing Kinzu's increasingly excessive actions, not to mention shooting him, she would at least resist strongly, even if it caused criticism from others. But what about now? Even the biggest advantage was taken by Kinzu, but she had to endure it. Damn, it's different with the system. Isn't this change too big? After washing his face with cold water, feeling the icy feeling in the past, Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head. Forget it, I'd better try to take it easy at night, otherwise, it would be uncomfortable to be surrounded by a group of slaves. Hey, brother, the sun is rising from the west today. After changing clothes, Kinzu just walked downstairs, and several people who were eating breakfast in the restaurant immediately cast their eyes on him with surprise or doubt. Especially Dale, this girl was bullied by Kinzu in the car yesterday, and now she feels a little uneasy when she sees her. Hey, boss, why are you here so early today? Liam, who was holding a sandwich with bacon and chewing it, raised his big hand and greeted him. Because the new dormitory of the ranch has not been built yet, the cowboys who have no place to live for the time being are now temporarily living in the villa. Of course, the place where they live is a different building from where Kinzu and his friends live. Otherwise, Kinzu would rather let them go back first than choose to live with them. This does not involve any discrimination, it is purely because he is not used to it. Or in other words, it is inconvenient. Who made him have women in his house except for himself? If you can't sleep, just get up and walk around, and exercise at the same time. Kinzu, who came back to his senses, responded with a smile, and after sitting down at his own seat, he asked, How about you? How familiar are you with this new ranch? Oh, I'm sorry, boss, I think we need more time to adapt to the new ranch life. After hearing Kinzu's question, Ryan put down the sandwich in his hand and shrugged helplessly. This ranch is really too big. We can't even go back and forth in a day on horseback. Not enough for a round trip in a day. Kinzu, who had just picked up a sandwich, was stunned for a moment when he heard the words, and then shook his head helplessly. Well, it seems that a bigger ranch does make many things inconvenient. Yes, boss, I think we need to replace new equipment. Hearing Kinzu's sigh, Ryan's eyes lit up, and he immediately continued. For example, add a few helicopters, or more powerful mountain bikes. Helicopters. Touching his chin, Kinzu nodded in agreement. He felt that his plan to buy an airplane should be put on the agenda. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga en y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1014 The Mysterious Pickup Person. Originally, Kinzu had just put the matter of buying a plane on the agenda and was going to visit Douglas in the near future, but Ryan and his friends obviously couldn't wait any longer. In desperation, Kinzu called Douglas that day and set off with his friends early the next morning. After more than 2 hours of boring journey, the group finally arrived at Billings Airport and boarded a plane to New York. Hey, this is really a hassle. If I had known earlier, I would have asked the guy to send the pictures over. Wouldn't it be okay if we just looked at the pictures and chose? Sitting on the plane, Kinzu looked at Ryan beside him and said helplessly, "No, boss, buying a plane is not like buying something else. You can't tell from the pictures alone." Ryan shook his head and retorted to Kinzu's statement. "If you don't test drive some models, you don't know how they perform at all." Okay, it seems that this trip is necessary." Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu closed his eyes helplessly. The ranch was so comfortable, with beautiful women and fine wine, he really didn't want to run around. After several hours of smooth flight, when the plane landed at the New York airport, it was already past 5 in the afternoon. "Erica, have you booked the hotel? Let's go to the hotel first, and then go eat something." After leaving the New York airport, Kinzu suddenly remembered that he had not asked the hotel to send a car to pick him up. "It has been booked, do we need to ask them to send a car?" Erica, who was traveling alone with Kinzu for the first time, was obviously not as skilled as Dale and Diva in this regard. At this time, she remembered this question. "Of course, no need." Kinzu wanted to say of course, but when he looked up, he unexpectedly saw a pickup sign with his name on it among the people who were picking up the plane. However, due to the distance, and there were a lot of people taking advantage of the opportunity, he could not see who was holding the pickup sign. However, he could vaguely see that it was a very slender woman. Could it be that they have the same name? Kinzu touched his head in confusion, and he was a little undecided for a while. Although he didn't keep it a secret that he came to New York today, he didn't ask anyone to pick him up. Otherwise, he wouldn't have found out that there was no car after leaving the airport. After hesitating for a while, Kinzu waved to Erica beside him and said, "Go over there and see who she is going to pick up." Although he thought that the person she was going to pick up might just be someone with the same name as him, for some reason, Kinzu felt a little inexplicably throbbing in his heart. Erica moved very quickly. Before Kinzu could figure out what was going on, she had already walked towards them with 2 figures, one big and one small, with a strange look on her face. "Boss, they said they know you." Uncle Clean, did you miss Shirley?" Accompanied by a childish voice, a small figure, under Kinzu's stunned gaze, trotted towards him. "Of course I did." It wasn't until the little girl rushed to him that Kinzu came back to his senses. He picked up the little girl and asked with a smile, "When did you come back? You didn't even tell your uncle." Although this sentence seemed to be said to the little girl, Kinzu's eyes were looking at the woman next to him who was wearing a black women's windbreaker, sunglasses and a mask, covering her face tightly. The meaning was very clear. "Why didn't you tell me when you came back?" Needless to say, since Shirley is here, this woman must be Christine. However, Christine ignored Kinzu's eyes and greeted Ryan and Ruya with a smile. As for Christine, who had been at the ranch for a while, Ryan and Ruya were naturally very familiar with her. Although they were a little surprised to see her, they didn't have the reaction of ordinary people seeing a big star for the first time. This also directly avoided the fate of being surrounded by onlookers. You know, although Christine has not released any new works in this period, her popularity is rising steadily, so that wherever she goes, she will be surrounded by people. "Uncle, Shirley wanted to tell you, but my mother said she wanted to give you a surprise, so I didn't tell you." It doesn't matter if Christine ignores Kinzu. Shirley likes Kinzu the most. When she saw him asking, she directly sold out her mother. "You little rascal, when did your mother say she wanted to give him a surprise?" Christine, who was originally calmly greeting Ryan and the others, couldn't help but blush when she heard the words, and gave the little girl a very charming look. He, Mama's shy." Although she was glaring at her, the little girl was not afraid at all. She hid in Kinzu's arms and whispered, "Uncle, let me tell you, Mom mentions your name every day, even when she is sleeping." "Ah, really?" Kinzu looked at Christine in surprise when he heard that. Am I that charming? What are you looking at? How credible do you think a child's words are? Christine, whose face was completely covered in red, looked at the little girl viciously and gritted her teeth and said, "Your little girl, you should know that this guy can't protect you forever. You'll see how I deal with you when I go there later." Hey, it's a bit bad to threaten a child like this in front of me, right? Since the little girl was so powerful, Kinzu certainly couldn't admit defeat. He changed his voice and hit Shirley, and said with a smile, "Chris, haven't you heard that children's words are often the most truthful, because they don't know how to lie?" Humph, so what? With a proud cold snort, Christine saw that she couldn't argue with Kinzu, so she simply turned her head away. "The car is outside, and Douglas has already booked a hotel for you. I'll take you to the hotel first." Douglas? No wonder. Nodding suddenly, Kinzu finally knew why that girl was here. It turned out that Douglas told them. Although Erica had already booked a hotel, Kinzu didn't even hesitate. He held the little girl and followed Christine out. There was no other way. If he didn't accept the call, it would be hurtful. They walked in front, and Erica followed behind with a weird look on her face. She didn't expect that her boss was so charming that even Hollywood stars couldn't forget him. Could he really be that good? Why couldn't she see it? Chapter 1015 Christine's Retention. "Gary, why didn't you tell me when you came back so I could pick you up?" After Kinzu got into the car prepared by Christine, he couldn't help but turn around and look at the beauty who was helping Shirley fasten her seatbelt. "Oh, Uncle, didn't I tell you?" Before Christine could answer, Shirley couldn't help but pout. "Mom wanted to give you a surprise, so I didn't tell you in advance." "Shirley, do you believe that I will beat your little butt?" Being betrayed by her daughter, Christine was really embarrassed. She raised her hands with a red face and pinched the little girl's chubby face. "Ah. Mom, I was wrong. Was I wrong? Don't pinch it." Shirley, whose little face was pinched, begged for mercy with a harsh voice. "Do you really know you were wrong?" Christine saw that the little girl was screaming a little loudly, and thought that she was too strong, so she quickly reduced the force a little. "I really know I'm wrong. I won't do it again." Shirley nodded her head pitifully, as if she had been tortured into confessing. Her expression was very aggrieved. "Your little girl, if you keep talking nonsense, I'll deal with you." Perhaps because there were only 3 of them and a driver in the car, there were not many people, so Christine was more relaxed, and her face returned to normal after a while. "I wanted to tell someone, but I was afraid that there would be too many women around him and he couldn't leave. Wouldn't that cause trouble?" "How could that be?" Kinzu shrugged helplessly, looking at Christine, who looked a little haggard, and promised with a serious face. "No matter when, as long as you say it, I will come to pick you up." "Well, I know." Being stared at by Kinzu with such a serious look, Christine suddenly felt a little uncomfortable and quickly looked away. "Ha, let's not talk about this. What are you going to do now that you're back? Are you leaving?" Seeing that the atmosphere in the car was a bit dull, Kinzu thought for a moment and changed the subject directly. "No, Mom said we're not leaving." It seemed that he had touched the little girl's itch. Shirley, who had just been scolded, suddenly became excited again and shouted happily, "Mom also said that she would buy a ranch next to you in the future, and we would be neighbors with Uncle." Looking at Christine in surprise, Kinzu felt a little proud and asked in confusion, "Christine, are you not going to film?" "Well, I'm not going to film. I'm going to retire." It seemed that she had already given up. Facing her daughter's betrayal again, Christine just rolled her eyes helplessly, and no longer had the panic of having her thoughts exposed before. "Really?" After confirming that there was nothing wrong with his ears, Kinzu smiled and shook his head. "This is not good news for those fans." "Then, what about you?" With a faint smile on her lips, Christine just looked at Kinzu quietly, waiting for his answer. "Me?" Kinzu was a little stunned when he heard it. Such a direct style is not very like Christine. However, the beauty is still staring at him, and there is no time for him to hesitate, so Kinzu nodded decisively. "Of course, this is simply great news for me." "Is that so?" "That's good. I was afraid that you would not welcome me at the time." Christine nodded with a smile, and seemed to be relieved, and her expression became a lot lighter. "Not welcome you?" Kinzu raised his head in surprise, looking at Christine's expression that could not hide her smile under her calmness, and asked in confusion, "Chris, are you really going to Montana?" "Oh, Uncle is so bad, always not believing Shirley." Just like the first time, Shirley grumbled in dissatisfaction without waiting for Christine to speak. Humph, if you don't believe Shirley, Shirley will ignore you. Shirley, sitting on the child's chair, hugged her chest with a pair of white and tender little hands, and turned her head to the side in a very arrogant manner. Hee, how could Uncle not believe Shirley? Kinzu had no way to deal with the little girl in front of him who was acting like a child, so he could only turn around and comfort her kindly. But this is a big deal after all, Uncle must confirm it, don't you think? Well, it seems to make sense. Touching her lips, the little girl looked at Kinzu with a sincere face, and suddenly a bright smile bloomed on her face. In this case, Shirley will forgive Uncle, but you have to take me out to play. Okay. Kinzu was a little surprised to get the little girl so easily, and hurriedly promised. Shirley, then when Uncle is done tomorrow, I will take you out to play, okay? Well, okay, then we have a deal. Nodding her little head, Shirley agreed very happily. Well, it's a deal. Kinzu finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. He stretched out his big hand, clenched it into a fist, and waved it in the air. Watching the two fists, one big and one small, collide in the air, for some reason, Christine beside him suddenly had the urge to cry. What a harmonious scene, but it's a pity that this is not a real family of three. Crunch, accompanied by a neat sound of brakes, several Mercedes-Benz S-Class luxury cars stopped steadily at the door of the hotel. Uncle, are you really not going back to live with us? Leaning on the car window, Shirley looked at Kinzu pitifully, and tears seemed to be rolling in her eyes. Is it a bit inconvenient? Although he was willing in his heart, Kinzu had a headache when he looked at the bodyguards and cowboys he brought with him. If he left these guys here and didn't care, he didn't know what they would say about him when he went back. It's okay, Clean, I have someone here. Raising her hand, Christine pointed to a few young men and women in uniforms who were coming over, and said with a smile, they will arrange accommodation for Ryan and the others. If you encounter any problems in the hotel, you can also find them. Well, in that case, I'll go and tell them. He swallowed his saliva with some difficulty. Since they had arranged it so carefully, Kinzu certainly couldn't refuse. He turned around and walked towards the crowd behind him. Boss, are we going to stay here? Seeing Kinzu come in, Ruya came over excitedly and said incoherently, this hotel is too luxurious. It costs a lot of money to stay for one night, right? Ha, you don't have to worry about these. Someone will treat you. Kinzu chuckled twice, clapped his hands, and when everyone's attention was focused, he smiled and pointed to his side. Everyone will follow these gentlemen to the hotel in a while. They will arrange everything. After checking in, everyone should have a good rest. We will go to choose the plane tomorrow. Okay, boss, don't worry. No one else had any objection to Kinzu's arrangement, but his bodyguards frowned. Boss, what are you doing? Erica came to Kinzu's side, looked around, and asked in a low voice. Nothing, I have something to do at my friend's house, you just wait for me here. But, no buts, I'm the boss, listen to me. Kinzu, who had known that this would happen, did not give Erica a chance to refute. He waved his hand and directly settled the matter. Chapter 1016 Kelly's Good Idea. Hi, boss, you're here so early. The next morning, when Ryan came back from morning exercise and met Kinzu in a hotel lobby, he was so surprised that his mouth could hardly close. Well, good morning. Yawning and rubbing his dry mouth, Kinzu looked at the time with a tired expression and asked, where are they? Are they all up? Yes, they are all up. Looking at Kinzu with a strange look, Ryan asked uncertainly, boss, are we leaving now? Let's go eat something first, and then we'll leave. Ignoring Ryan's strange look, Kinzu smiled and said, try to settle things today. Then we can have a good time for a few days. Hey, boss, are you sure you don't need to rest first? After hesitating for a moment, Ryan still advised, you should rest before going. After all, you have been working hard all night. There is no need to rush now, otherwise your body will not be able to bear it. I'm fine, I just don't sleep enough. Touching his nose embarrassedly, Kinzu was depressed. Of course he understood what this guy meant. He thought that he was accompanied by a beauty last night and was a big star, so he must have been tossing all night. But what is the truth? The fact is, I was entangled by Kelly, that stinky girl, all night long. There was a beautiful woman waiting in bed, but I was telling a story to this little girl next door. But this girl seemed to have taken stimulants, and she just wouldn't sleep no matter what, which made Kinzu helpless. In the end, Kinzu's mouth was numb, and the little girl finally fell asleep. However, when Kinzu looked at the time, he was dumbfounded. Unknowingly, it was already past 5 in the morning. He and Douglas had an appointment at 9 in the morning. Counting the time on the road, why should he sleep? Kinzu wanted to push the matter away, take a good rest for a day, and go tomorrow. But then he thought, this matter is about asking others for help, and they have much more things to do than he does. If he casually broke the appointment, his impression in their hearts would probably fall below the bottom line. After all, no one wants to associate with a guy who can't figure it out. That's just asking for abuse. Okay, boss, I'll go call them down now. Shrugging his shoulders, seeing Kinzu's insistence, Ryan said nothing more and went straight upstairs. However, a trace of doubt remained in his heart. Could it be that being a big star is really that good? How could even a rich man like the boss who never lacks women not be able to control himself? Of course, Kinzu didn't know what was in this guy's mind, otherwise, he would probably be even more depressed and want to cry. When Kinzu brought his group of cowboys and took the car sent by Douglas to an aircraft manufacturing plant in the suburbs of New York, it was exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. Ha, Clean, long time no see, you are still so punctual. Douglas, who was waiting downstairs in the office building, gave Kinzu a bear hug after seeing him. However, after he let Kinzu go, the expression on his face was a little stunned. Clean, how long have you not slept? Did you not sleep well in the hotel yesterday? At this point, Douglas turned around and looked at a blonde who looked like a secretary behind him, frowning and said, from now on, cancel all cooperation with that hotel. This, Kinzu opened his mouth. Although he wanted to defend the innocent hotel, he didn't know what to say. Could it be that I didn't sleep in the hotel yesterday, but went to your cousin's house to sleep? In that case, let alone whether this guy would go crazy, if this matter was spread out, it would have a huge impact on Christine. However, he didn't say it, but someone said it. Doug, he didn't sleep in the hotel. Christine, smiling, walked out of the office building behind Douglas with a happy step. Behind her, there was Kelly, who Kinzu wanted to pull over and spank. Didn't you sleep in the hotel? Douglas blinked in confusion and looked at Christine with a puzzled look. He seemed to have thought of something and his expression suddenly became ambiguous. Clean, is it because you guys were too busy last night? Doug, don't get me wrong, it's not true. A few black lines floated across his forehead. Kinzu looked at the guy in front of him who was smiling very ambiguously and speaking without any concealment, and he couldn't help but come to a conclusion in his heart. This guy is indeed not Christine's biological brother. If he was a biological brother, he would not be so calm after knowing that his sister was slept with by someone else. It's not true. Listening to Kinzu's words, Douglas not only did not show any intention of restraining himself, but asked with a smirk, Clean, are you saying that you slept all night and did nothing? Rubbing his slightly hot temples, Kinzu felt helpless in his heart. If he could, he really wanted to block the big mouth in front of him. Okay, you guys should get down to business first. I don't know if she already knew the character of her cousin, but in the face of his teasing, Christine didn't make a good excuse, but looked at Kinzu meaningfully. Just finish the business, so I can let someone have a good rest. Okay, in that case, let's go in. Laughing and winking at Kinzu, Douglas led the way in front, and the group walked into the office building. Hey, are you helping? Or are you helping? Shrugging helplessly, Kinzu walked beside Christine and said with a wry smile, that big mouth doesn't know how to restrain himself. Aren't you afraid that this matter will be spread? After all, we didn't do anything. Hey, Clean, do you mean that it's okay to do it? Christine looked at Kinzu with a sweet smile and teased, I didn't expect that you have so many bad thoughts. Fortunately, our Kelly performed well yesterday and didn't let the bad guy succeed. After hearing what Christine said, before Kinzu had time to speak, Kelly's face was a little red, and she said, Uncle, I really didn't mean it, I just missed you too much. No, it's okay, I miss you too, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Touching his nose awkwardly, Kinzu didn't know what to say. Talking about this with such a young child who had just come out of autism, he felt full of guilt. However, what he didn't expect was that as soon as he finished speaking, the little girl seemed to suddenly think of something, clapped her hands, and said excitedly, By the way, Uncle, why don't you come over tonight? I promise not to bother you anymore and let you go find your mother. Kinzu. Christine. Chapter 1017 Finalizing the helicopter buzz, accompanied by the roar of propellers, two dark shadows suddenly flashed in a suburb of New York. After staying in the office building for a while, Kinzu and his team went directly to the hangar to select a plane for test flight under the leadership of Douglas. Anyway, they basically have a model of each model for test flight, so they are not afraid of trouble. Ha, Clean, how is it? My skills are not bad, right? Sitting in the driving seat of a helicopter painted black and gold, Douglas looked at Kinzu sitting next to him with a proud face, and said in a tone full of temptation, "Do you want to try it yourself? Flying freely in the sky, this is the ultimate dream of mankind." While speaking, Douglas has been paying attention to the expression on Kinzu's face. When he saw him eager to try but helpless, he felt so comfortable in his heart. Thinking back to the past, when he saw others flying their own planes and flying freely in the sky, he was so envious. However, he was still young at the time and did not have the qualifications to fly a plane by himself. Now, after so many years, he can finally let others experience the helpless mood he had at the time. Forget it. I guess I'll drop the plane. I don't know what happened yet. Kinzu pouted his lips and looked up at the layout and design of the entire cockpit in order to divert his attention. Although this helicopter was strongly recommended to him by Douglas, he would not give Douglas this face if the effect did not meet his requirements. On the contrary, if the data of this helicopter in all aspects can meet his requirements, then Kinzu will directly buy 6 back, even as a means of transportation for the cowboys. Fortunately, Douglas did not disappoint Kinzu's expectations of him. After all, this helicopter was independently developed by Doug Arsenal, and its performance is definitely several blocks higher than that of similar helicopters. There is no way, who let them mainly make military helicopters. This Doug-1 is not as good as the Black Hawk, but as a civilian helicopter, it is already perfect. The overall shape of the helicopter is very similar to his previous Bell-470, and the curve is very beautiful. Not to mention its interior, which is absolutely worth its high price. As for the rest, we need to wait for Ryan and Real's opinions. After all, he has never flown a plane, so he can't tell whether it is good or bad. There are thousands of thoughts in his mind, but it did not stop Kinzu's curiosity. When the 2 helicopters landed safely on the helipad on the roof of the Arsenal, Kinzu quietly approached Douglas and asked with some expectation, "Doug, how do you fly a plane? Is there anyone who can teach you?" "Of course, Clean, don't you know that there are flight schools in the United States?" Shrugging his shoulders, Douglas jumped off the helicopter and asked with a smile, "Why? Clean, do you also want to learn to fly a plane?" Why not? After being ruthlessly exposed by Douglas, Kinzu could only shrug helplessly and directly admitted it. "Ha, this is easy." Laughing and patting Kinzu's shoulder, Douglas walked and said, "As long as you have enough US dollars, you can do anything you want in America." "Really?" Kinzu smiled non-committally. If it were in the past, Kinzu might still believe this, but since several princes bought his ranch, he has recognized a reality. US dollars may be important, but interpersonal relationships are more important. "Okay, Clean, how about it? Which one do you like?" After returning to the lounge, after several people sat around the big sofa, Douglas smiled and put the airplane album on the coffee table. "Hey, Ryan, what do you think?" Kinzu flicked through the album while holding it, and did not forget to look at Ryan and Ruya with his inquiring eyes. After all, they are the ones who buy the plane to fly it. If they don't like to fly or can't fly, then it will be a waste in the end, right? "Boss, we think this one is good." Facing Kinzu's inquiring eyes, the 2 guys shrugged indifferently, indicating that they had no objection. "Okay, Doug, let's go with the one you recommended." After confirming that the cowboys had no objection, Kinzu had nothing to say. Anyway, he felt that the planes he had tried all flew about the same. After all, they were not as good as his own Black Hawk. However, the Black Hawk was not suitable for flying in Montana after all, otherwise it would be no joke if it was caught. Thinking of this, Kinzu couldn't help but feel sad, and his originally high mood suddenly became low. "What's wrong? Clean, don't you think this price is not suitable?" Seeing this, Douglas frowned and felt a little confused. I remember that this guy was not such a stingy person before. Why did he become like this when I slightly exaggerated the price? "Oh, it's okay, the price is very suitable." Kinzu came back to his senses and shook his head with a wry smile. "I just feel a little regretful. I haven't used the Black Hawk for long, and it's just sitting idle in Los Angeles." "What? Idle?" Douglas looked up in confusion after a pause. "Yes, it's idle." Kinzu nodded helplessly and muttered with some emotion, "I dare not use this modified aircraft in Montana. After all, I'm unfamiliar with the place. It would be embarrassing if I get caught. How could it be? Douglas shook his head in confusion and explained with a smile. Clean, as long as you remove those illegal modifications, the helicopter can still be used normally. Is this okay? Kinzu asked blankly. Why not? Shrugging his shoulders, Douglas looked at Kinzu with some envy. Clean, you have to know that your Black Hawk was obtained through proper procedures and was a gift from the Prince of the British Empire. As long as you don't modify it, it's fine even if you fly it in front of the White House. And, at this point, Douglas paused, glanced at the people around him, and said with a smile, why do you want to modify it? Clean, you can get some automatic weapons licenses, and then you can sit on a helicopter and fire, isn't it the same? Automatic weapons? For example? Touching his chin, Kinzu thought of the two big killers that Dale bought a few days ago, and couldn't help but smile. Yes, why did he modify it? In fact, isn't it better to have a weapon that can be disassembled at any time? Clean, since you know, let's talk about the next thing. Seeing that Kinzu understood what he meant, Douglas couldn't help but smile and change the subject. Of course, I'm going to see your business jet. Kinzu nodded with a smile and agreed. Indeed, they are going to talk about the next thing. Although he had already decided to buy the Doug-1 helicopter, his biggest purpose for this trip was to buy a business jet. Compared with business jets that cost tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, a helicopter worth tens of millions of dollars was really nothing. Chapter 1018 Hidden Manufacturing Center. Speaking of the American business jet market, the two aviation giants Airbus and Boeing are not the ones with the highest market share. Undoubtedly, in the field of aviation aircraft manufacturing in the world, these two companies can be ranked in the top 10. However, they have not invested much energy in the field of private business jets. So, you mean that your Duck company can surpass Boeing and Airbus in the field of business jets, right? Kinzu put down the information in his hand, raised his head, and looked at Douglas with a teasing face. Of course. To Kinzu's surprise, Douglas actually nodded, with an expression of matter-of-factness, which made him feel a little bit of a toothache. Clean, don't disbelieve it. As if guessing what Kinzu was thinking, Douglas smiled and shook his head. Boeing and Airbus are indeed powerful, but they look down on or have no interest in private aircraft. Their main business now is passenger aircraft or military aircraft. Is that so? Kinzu nodded with relief, subconsciously touched his nose, and asked with a chuckle. So, who is the most powerful in the field of private aircraft? You don't want to say your family? Of course not. Waving his hand, Douglas explained with a smile. Although our family's strength is also very good, compared with Bombardier, there is still some gap. Bombardier? This name sounds familiar. Kinzu looked at Christine beside him with some doubts, wondering if he was thinking too much. It's normal to sound familiar. Christine smiled and nodded. Because Bombardier is a large international company with many products. Private business aircraft is just the business of their aerospace company. Okay, I said it. Shrugging helplessly, although the expression on his face did not change much, Kinzu inexplicably felt a sense of frustration in his heart. Compared with those truly rich people in the world, he is still too poor. Others build airplanes, sell arms, and be princes, but I am the only one who wanders around all day doing nothing. Perhaps, I should change something. With a hint of self-doubt, Kinzu flicked through the album in his hand again and again, making everyone present look at each other in bewilderment. What's wrong? Clean, isn't there anything you like? Douglas looked at the album in confusion, and couldn't help but murmur in his heart. Really? So many models of airplanes, but there is not a suitable one? No, it's not like that. Douglas was awakened from his astonishment, and Kinzu waved his hand hurriedly. I just want to see their shapes, that's all. Okay. Nodding in understanding, Douglas looked at the time, and then smiled and said, how about this, Clean, since you want to see the shapes, let's go to the scene. There are several airplanes being assembled today. Is it okay? Kinzu was stunned when he heard this, and when he woke up, he couldn't help feeling depressed. I was just being modest, why did you agree? However, things have come to this point. Although Kinzu is depressed, it is useless. He can only stand up with a smile and follow that group to go outside. After leaving the office building, without giving Kinzu time to hesitate, Douglas waved his hand, and two Doug-1s quickly approached. Clean, let's go up first, and we'll talk about it when we get there. After waving at Kinzu, Douglas got into the helicopter first. This guy, why is he so impulsive? After getting on the plane, Kinzu shook his head helplessly. I was planning to go back at night, but it seems there's no hope. Go back? So soon? Hearing Qin Zhu's mumbling, Christine, who was following him, had a darkened face and asked expectantly, "Can't you stay for a few more days?" "Stay?" Qin Zhu looked at Christine with a puzzled look and said with a smile, "Of course you can stay, but it's not fun here." "How can it be boring, uncle? You still have to tell Shirley a story." The little girl who had been paying attention to the conversation between the two decisively disrupted a guy's good idea, making him hate it so much. "Yes, tell a story. I remember a guy promised Shirley." Christine's eyes lit up and she quickly agreed with a smile. Okay. Shrugging helplessly, Qin Zhu looked at the calendar on his watch, pondered for a while, and then nodded. "But I can't stay too long. I have to go back to repair the runway. If there is no runway when the plane comes, it will be a bit troublesome." "Ha, isn't it faster to repair the runway?" Seeing Qin Zhu agreed to stay for a few more days, for some reason, Christine's heart suddenly became bright. Could it be that she fell in love with this playboy? Impossible. She likes girls, how could she like men? However, although Christine herself didn't want to admit it, she vaguely understood something. It seemed that her feelings towards the guy were indeed different. Shirley on the side didn't know the complicated thoughts of the adults. Seeing that Uncle Qin, whom she liked very much, agreed to stay and tell her stories, the smile on her little face suddenly became brighter. After flying in the sky for more than half an hour, the helicopter finally stopped in front of a building after crossing a mountain range. "Qin, welcome to the Douglas Aircraft Manufacturing Center." Douglas, who got off the car first, confirmed his identity with the security guards guarding outside the door, and walked straight in with Qin Zhu and his group. "Aircraft Manufacturing Center? What was that just now?" Qin Zhu touched his nose and felt a little dizzy. "Wasn't that just now an aircraft manufacturing center?" No. "Qin, you misunderstood." Hearing what Qin Zhu said, Douglas waved his hand and said with a smile, "Just now it was just a helicopter assembly workshop and an external office. The real parts and so on all produced here." "All produced here? But it doesn't look big." Qin Zhu had seen it on the plane just now. Although this piece of building is hidden in the mountains and forests, according to his observation, the scale is not very large. "Not big?" Douglas smiled and shrugged his shoulders at the question raised by Qin Zhu. "Qin, you have to know that although this is a suburb of New York, or half of it no longer belongs to New York, its land price is also very deceptive. And don't look at it as if it is built outside. In fact, half of the main body is underground or inside the mountain. You'll know after you go in." "Well, why does it feel like a TV show?" Although he said so, in Qin Zhu's heart, he had already thought of the tunnel war launched when China was invaded. Could it be that the Americans learned it so quickly? Chapter 1019. The medium-sized machine that defeated the large-sized machine. In May, the sun in New York was already very bright. Even in the dense mountains, one could still feel the warmth. Walking on the small path between the mountains, looking at the green shrubs and pines and cypresses around him, Qin Zhu sighed. "The weather here is still comfortable. I can feel the breath of spring. In Montana, it's almost winter at night. Then come back." Christine, who was following behind Qin Zhu, heard the words and said without hesitation, "Since you feel comfortable here, why don't you sell the ranch and come to New York to develop? With Doug's help, what can't be more profitable than running a ranch? Come here to develop." Looking up at the aircraft manufacturing field built with reinforced concrete not far away, Qin Zhu shook his head and sighed. "No, Gary, you don't understand, this place is not suitable for me." "What?" Christine spread her hands in frustration and looked at Qin Zhu in confusion. "Qin, you always say it's not suitable for you, so why don't you tell me, what's wrong with New York?" In fact, this question has been in Christine's mind for a long time. A billionaire, he doesn't like the bright lights and nightlife in big cities, and always likes to run to those deserted villages. If this billionaire is an elderly man, Christine can understand it. After all, it is normal for the elderly to like quietness and not want to be disturbed. But the problem is that this billionaire is still very young, and not just ordinary young. Maybe it's because there are too few Chinese here. After hesitating for a moment, Qin Zhu really didn't know how to explain his problem, so he could only find a reason that was not a reason. "After all, I just came from China, and I don't feel too used to staying in this underworld full of unfamiliar faces. There is no way he can't tell this girl about the system, right? Besides, even if he said it, whether people believe it or not is still another matter. However, Christine is even more unconvinced by his current explanation. Clean, since you don't want to talk about it, forget it. Shrugging his shoulders, Christine smiled somewhat listlessly. Maybe you can buy a house in New York, so that when you have nothing to do, you can come here for a vacation or something. Hey, I say, does Keen still need to buy a house? Douglas, who had been walking in front, suddenly turned around and said with a teasing look on his face. The house he stayed in last night was pretty good. Wouldn't it be fine if he just stayed there when he comes here next time? Don't you think so, Shirley? Yes, yes. As if she had colluded with Douglas, Shirley echoed him as soon as he finished speaking. In this way, Uncle can still tell me stories, don't you think so, Uncle? Yes. Keen's you, who was a little confused by the question, touched his nose and answered subconsciously. What is it? Hurry up and do your business. Christine, who was already a little depressed, was squeezed by a few guys like this, and suddenly became a little embarrassed and angry. Okay, Clean, let's go, let's get down to business. Seeing his cousin's rage, Douglas laughed and hurriedly pulled Keen's you forward. The bloody lessons from childhood to adulthood made Douglas realize one thing deeply. Never get entangled with a woman in anger, they often do things beyond your expectations. After walking around the entire aircraft manufacturing center with Douglas for an afternoon, Keen's you's legs were almost numb, and he didn't see the reason. First, because the base is too large, even if there are vehicles to travel, they still spent a lot of time on the road. Second, because Keen's you didn't understand those mechanical equipment at all, he could only listen to the heated discussions of several guys. Fortunately, they were not here to invest after all, and they didn't need to see too many workshops. So, Keen's you and his team just observed the assembly workshop for a while, went to the hangar, and then returned to the meeting room. Clean, how is it? Sitting down in his seat, Douglas first wiped the sweat from his forehead, then asked with a smile. Did you like any of the models just now? If so, I'll give it to you first, and then I'll give them another one. No, Doug, you can't do that. Keen's you was a little confused when he heard that Douglas was going to directly adjust a plane for him from the finished products, and it was the kind that could be driven away right away. What a joke. My runway hasn't been repaired yet, where can I put it when I drive it back? Besides, aren't you afraid that those buyers will come after you and fight you? Fortunately, after Keen's you's earnest persuasion, this guy finally gave up the idea. Okay, since your runway hasn't been repaired, there's nothing I can do. He shrugged helplessly. Since Keen's you still needed time to repair the runway, Douglas could only postpone the plan. Clean, how about this? You pick a style first, and I'll ask the factory to produce it for you urgently. By the time your runway is repaired, the plane should be almost ready. That's fine. Touching his chin, Keen's you thought for a while, then picked up the album on the table and quickly flipped through it. Since this guy said so, if he didn't pay attention, he would be too sorry for him. In fact, when Keen's you first started flipping through the album, he had already made a choice in his mind. This time he just wanted to find it. I found it, this one. Keen's you paused, pointed to a silver-gray business jet in the album, and said with a smile, Doug, when you spray paint the outside, remember to spray the logo of our Tycoon ranch. Of course, everything is arranged by God. Shrugging his shoulders, Douglas took the album and took a look, and immediately laughed. Clean, you have a good eye. This is a business jet we just developed, which is used for international flights. What? It can fly international flights? Keen's you, who had a smug expression on his face, stood up after hearing this and said in surprise, Doug, are you mistaken? This is a medium-sized aircraft. It's good enough to fly from New York to Montana, or the international route you said is Canada. No, Clean, I'm not wrong, and you didn't hear it wrong. Raising a finger in front of him and waving it, Douglas explained with a smug look on his face. Don't look at its body length, it only meets the standard of a medium-sized business jet, but its fuel tank is very large, twice as large as a normal business jet, and its fuel consumption is much lower than that of an ordinary medium-sized business jet. This, Doug, are you sure you are not dreaming? Keen's you couldn't help but touch his nose. Listening to Douglas's introduction, he felt like he was listening to a joke. If this type of aircraft really appeared, would anyone still buy those large business jets? Chapter 1020. Douglas hesitates to speak. Although Keen's you didn't really believe Douglas's introduction, he couldn't resist this guy's persistence. Facing Keen's you's doubts, Douglas always smiled and put a piece of data in front of him. But, if the theory can be taken seriously, why do we need to practice it? Clean, don't worry. Although this plane has just been finalized, it has already sold a lot. Patting Kinzu on the shoulder with a smile, Douglas assured confidently. Even if you don't trust me, can you not trust the strength of Doug Industries? It's not that I don't believe you, but once your plane comes out, how can Airbus survive? Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Kinzu asked in some confusion. Are you going to challenge Bombardier's position? Otherwise, why study this thing? Hey, no wonder they say that Chinese people are smart, you guessed it all. Looking at Kinzu in surprise, Douglas walked back to his seat and turned on the projection screen behind him. This is the Bombardier Global 8000, which is said to be the longest flying business jet. It can fly directly from Los Angeles to China without stopping, with 8 passengers, and has a range of nearly 8,000 nautical miles. Well, I've heard of this plane. Kinzu nodded as he looked at the huge plane on the projection screen. I remember there is another plane called the Bombardier Global 7000, which seems to have a similar range. It is said that they are both very popular. That's right. Douglas turned his head and looked at Kinzu, smiling and introducing. These 2 planes were sold out as soon as they were produced, and now Bombardier is increasing production and preparing to put more Global 8000s on the market next year. What do you mean? Kinzu was a little puzzled. Why are you telling me about these business matters? Ahem, this, being caught off guard by Kinzu's straightforward question, Douglas coughed twice, looked at the many people in the conference room, and still held back and didn't say anything, but changed the subject. Clean, what do you think of this plane? Are you interested in buying one? Well, I'm interested, but what about the price? Although he felt that Douglas's purpose might not be pure, he did not say it, so Kinzu pretended not to see it, stroking his chin and continuing to look at the album in front of him. Don't worry about the price. Douglas waved his hand very generously. Since we are competing with Bombardier, the price must be not much different. The price of the bare machine is even lower than theirs, only $55 million. How much? 55 million? He looked up at Douglas in astonishment. Moreover, because he was too surprised, Kinzu ignored that this guy was talking about us, not us. Although there is only one word difference, the meaning is completely different. Yes, Clean, you heard it right. Douglas nodded affirmatively. The bare machine price of this aircraft is really only $55 million. But I remember that the price of Bombardier Global 7000 seems to be $80 million, right? Kinzu asked uncertainly. Oh, no. Douglas waved his hand with certainty. Clean, the price you mentioned must be the price of the whole machine. We are talking about the bare machine now. Kinzu was confused, looking at the complacent guy opposite, and he was very depressed. What? Are you still quibbling with me? Believe it or not, I will kill you in a minute. However, Kinzu, who has never bought an airplane, really doesn't understand the difference between a bare machine and a whole machine. It's very simple. Shrugging his shoulders, Douglas said with a smile. A bare machine is actually an airplane that has just left the factory. We guarantee that it can fly, but we are not responsible for its internal decoration. In other words, it's almost the same as a rough house. Kinzu looked at him suspiciously. It won't even have water and electricity, right? Of course, Douglas nodded, confirming Kinzu's guess. These things were only laid out during the later decoration. After all, it's a private jet. How can we know the taste of each customer? Moreover, what if he doesn't like it after the decoration is completed and refuses to pay for it? That's true. Touching his chin, Kinzu didn't know what to say for a while about Douglas's explanation. After all, since it's his personal things, he certainly doesn't like it to be the same as others, and some special requirements are understandable. At this time, Douglas's cell phone suddenly rang. He looked at the phone, then raised his wrist to check the time. It seemed that there was something urgent, so he urged directly. How about it? Clean, have you considered it? Well, okay, since you have recommended it, then I will choose this model. Kinzu nodded very readily and stood up with a smile. When the plane is ready, remember to notify me to come and decorate it. Ha, that's for sure. Douglas also stood up, put away the documents on the table, and said apologetically, I'm really sorry, I have something to do at the head office, so I'll leave for a while. There will be a dinner at my manor tonight, remember to come with Kerry. Okay, go and do your work first. Although Kinzu didn't like these banquets, he looked at Grissom beside him and agreed as if possessed by a ghost. Okay, that's it, I'll take my leave first. Nodding to everyone, Douglas walked out of the meeting room directly, got on a helicopter that had been waiting for a long time, and headed towards the New York City. Gary, let's go back to... There's nothing to see here. After Douglas left, Kinzu visited several factories accompanied by Kristen, and felt a little bored. Looking at the workers in the production workshops, Kinzu thought about his previous work experience and suddenly sighed. Why is there such a big difference when it comes to work? Although he didn't ask about their salary, based on experience, their monthly salary is probably higher than his annual salary. Okay, since you don't like it, let's go back first. Christine also felt a little bored, and immediately agreed to it after hearing it. The group followed and got on the helicopter. It's true, when I came here, I didn't feel anything because it wasn't a direct flight. But when I went back, Kinzu found something wrong. Damn, it takes more than an hour to fly from the base to downtown New York by helicopter. Such a long distance is almost catching up with the distance he traveled from Boston to New York. Kinzu couldn't understand why Douglas didn't put the aircraft manufacturing plant farther away since it was already so far away. For example, in the suburbs of Boston, or even in the Appalachian Mountains. Wouldn't it be safer and more hidden there? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1021 Investment. Just as Kinzu expected, the dinner at Douglas Manor was boring as usual. If it weren't for the Hollywood star accompanying him, Kinzu even thought of finding a place to secretly sleep. Fortunately, Christine's mind was not on the dinner party now. Seeing that Kinzu was not interested in the party, she secretly took him to a room and chatted on the bed. Well, although they were sitting on the bed and hugging each other to chat, Kinzu dared to swear to the sky that the relationship between them was really pure. Even Kinzu's and Lushang claws, which were usually very restless, became honest at this moment. Clean, Douglas may talk to you about something later. If you are not interested, just refuse directly. Christine, who was lying in Kinzu's arms with her eyes closed, seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly opened her beautiful eyes and smiled and said, I know you Orientals love face, but sometimes business is business, there is no need to pay so much attention to personal feelings. Well, okay. Although he was a little confused, Kinzu still smiled and nodded and agreed. Don't worry, I won't talk about personal feelings, unless you come forward in person, then I may let you take advantage of me. Who wants to take advantage of you? Hearing Kinzu's words, Christine, who was already a little guilty, couldn't help but roll her eyes at him coquettishly. It's obvious that you always take advantage of me, okay? Really? Kinzu glanced at the beauty in his arms with ill intentions, and said pointedly, I remember that someone has always been proud of stealing my girlfriend. Did I remember it wrong? What? That's impossible, no. Hearing Kinzu talking about this, Christine, who was originally very calm, suddenly hit two blushes on her cheeks. There was no way, this was too embarrassing. Moreover, if it wasn't for the bad guy seeing her body naked at the time, she wouldn't be so entangled now. Okay, let's not talk about this, let's talk about your future plans. After laughing, seeing that Christine was a little embarrassed, Kinzu quickly changed the subject. Future plans? After a moment of silence, Christine slowly regained her composure and shook her head in a daze. I don't know either. You don't know? Kinzu looked at her in surprise and shook his head in amusement. What's there to not know? Just do whatever you want. Anyway, you're not short of money now, so there's no need to go to film anymore. Yeah, I don't like filming either, so I turned down all the scripts this year. But after turning down the scripts, I don't know what to do. Christine muttered in distress. Kinzu was also a little entangled after hearing what Christine said. Chris, what do you like to do besides filming? I don't know. Shaking her head, Christine said helplessly. I feel like I like everything, but I can't do anything, so I feel like I don't like anything. Shaking his head with a wry smile, Kinzu really didn't know what to say, so he could only sigh. In that case, you should stay at home and accompany Shirley. If you're bored, go out for a walk. When you think of something to do, do it. That's the only way now. Christine stuck out her tongue and blinked cunningly. Anyway, I've pushed all the work and quit the entertainment industry. I'll just find a good man to marry in the future. Touching his nose, Kinzu smiled awkwardly and looked at her, and asked shamelessly, Are you talking about me? I'm a little embarrassed to be so direct. After looking at Kinzu with eyes wide open for a long time, Christine finally said something through her teeth. Who told me that Chinese people are very reserved, very shy, and very loyal in their relationships? Where's my knife? After spending more than an hour with Christine in the bedroom, Douglas called when the banquet was about to end. Doug, is there anything you can't just say? Kinzu shrugged helplessly after seeing Douglas in a lounge. You know I don't like this kind of occasion. Why do you have to drag me here to suffer? Hey, Clean, this is your fault. Shaking the wine glass in his hand, Douglas motioned Kinzu to sit on the sofa beside him, and said with a smile, you are now a billionaire, and a billionaire with your own business. Although you don't like it, you'll definitely need this kind of occasion in the future. I'm just helping you adapt in advance. So I have to thank you. Kinzu glanced at this guy and said speechlessly, oh, no, thank you. After sipping the red wine comfortably, Douglas smiled and said, just do me a favor. Tell me, what is it? Spreading his hands, Kinzu smiled and teased. It must not be a small matter that can make you, young Master Doug, ask a commoner like me for help. No, Clean, you guessed wrong again. Shaking his fingers, Douglas stood up with a smile and placed a document in front of Kinzu. This is absolutely a small matter for you. It just depends on whether you're interested. Kinzu took the document curiously and flicked it open. He was relieved immediately. Prospectus. Are you looking for financing? How much do you need? That's right. The document Douglas showed Kinzu was actually a prospectus. Although Kinzu hadn't read it carefully yet and didn't even know what company he was going to invest in, it didn't matter to him. He had already decided in his heart that no matter how much money Douglas needed, as long as he had it, he would invest. Because for Kinzu now, anything that can be solved with money is not a big deal. Moreover, apart from anything else, relying on Douglas' help for so many times, let alone raising funds, Kinzu would not blink an eye even if it was to borrow money. There is no way. Who made him a man of friendship? Anyone who values friendship hates to owe others favors the most. Douglas has helped him so many times, Kinzu has long wanted to repay him, but he has never had the chance. First of all, he is richer than him. Secondly, she is more powerful than him. Thirdly, those who like to hang out at banquets and have such high status never lack women. So, after thinking about it, Kinzu couldn't think of any way to express his gratitude. Now that he finally has such an opportunity, how can Kinzu not seize it? What's more, does the company under the Duck Group have any loss-making industries? Chapter 1022A. Billion-dollar investment. What did you say? After Kinzu heard Douglas's idea, he stood up from the sofa. Doug, are you sure you were right? You want to sell the shares of the aircraft manufacturing plant? Kinzu was not surprised. In fact, anyone who knew a little about Doug Industries would not believe his ears when he heard the news. Although Doug Aircraft Manufacturing Plant is only a subsidiary of Doug Industries, its importance to Doug Industries is like the combat effectiveness of an aircraft carrier. Without this aircraft manufacturing plant, the influence of Doug Industries in the whole of America would be greatly weakened. But for such an important subsidiary, Douglas is now selling its shares? Is he crazy? Isn't he afraid that Daddy Doug will remove his third leg? Kinzu has reason to believe that as long as this guy dares to touch the shares of the aircraft manufacturing plant, Daddy Doug will dare to destroy this guy. No, Clean, don't get me wrong. Douglas, who originally wanted to laugh at Kinzu's joke, was frightened by his loud voice and waved his hands quickly, saying, keep your voice down. I never said I was going to sell my shares in the aircraft manufacturing plant. If my dad hears this, I'll have to rely on you for the rest of my life. Bah, I'll support you. I'm more like supporting your sister. Kinzu was a little amused by this guy's cowardly look. He shook the prospectus in his hand helplessly and asked, since you are not selling shares in the aircraft manufacturing plant, what does this mean? Isn't it written here that it's an aircraft manufacturing plant? Of course. Nodding affirmatively, Douglas put away the smile on his face and explained very seriously, although it's also written here that it's an aircraft manufacturing plant, it has nothing to do with our Doug Industries aircraft manufacturing plant. This is a brand new manufacturing plant that has not yet started construction and has just been designed and finalized. Well, what do you mean? Kinzu somewhat understood what Douglas meant, but he still looked at this guy with some uncertainty. Would he get this kind of good thing that fell from the sky? It is obvious that once this aircraft manufacturing plant with technology, funds and customer base is built, it will definitely make a lot of money. It can even be said that when the time comes, Kinzu can just lie at home and do nothing and count money until his hands cramp. But, for such a good thing, why would Douglas take him with him? Could it be because of Christine? Thinking about it, Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable. Although no one would complain that he had too much money, Kinzu, was not a person who was short of money now. Did he still need to rely on women's relationships to make money? Don't think too much. Douglas shrugged helplessly, as if he saw what Kinzu was thinking. Although this new company has no shortage of technology and workers, it lacks funds and customers. Some of them even borrowed money to build factories, and they will have to buy equipment later, so the funding gap will be even greater. How could it be? Kinzu was not relieved after listening to Douglas' explanation, but became more confused. Is there a problem with the working capital of your group? This is impossible, right? Of course it's impossible. Touching his nose, Douglas thought for a while and decided to make things clear first. In fact, this aircraft manufacturing plant has nothing to do with duck industry. Except that I will borrow their engineers to help when the time comes, the rest will all depend on us. In other words, this is your own independent business. Kinzu looked at this guy thoughtfully. If this is the case, then this matter can be explained. After all, although duck industry is very rich, the money belongs to the entire Douglas family, not to him, Douglas. You can say that. Facing Kinzu, the big money sponsor, Douglas can be said to value it very much. After leaving the help of his family, Douglas realized that he was so poor. When he was in the group company before, he didn't feel anything even if he spent billions of dollars with a wave of his hand, let alone hundreds of millions of dollars. But now it's not possible. Now, let alone billions of dollars, even the money for buying land and building factories is scraped together, and he also took out his dividends in recent years, which is barely enough. Since Doug is willing to help me get rich, what else can I say? Kinzu spread his hands and said very happily, "Tell me, how much money do you need?" 1 billion. Douglas didn't argue with Kinzu, and directly reported a number that was astronomical to ordinary people. 1 billion? Although this number is a bit large, Kinzu didn't think much about it, and didn't even ask how many shares he could buy. He nodded directly and said, "Okay, I'll let Jennifer transfer it to you tomorrow." You're really a good friend. Seeing Kinzu agreed so readily, Douglas was happy. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel envious. Sure enough, it is more enjoyable to spend one's own money. Unlike me, even though I controlled so much money in the group before, every time there was a big expenditure, I still had to get approval from the board of directors. Since you are so generous, I can't be stingy. Douglas stretched out his big hand, patted Kinzu's shoulder hard, and said with a smile, $1 billion, I will give you 30% of the shares, and you have voting rights. How about it? 30%? Kinzu was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly waved his hand and said, "This is too much, Doug. You are so generous. Be careful to kneel on the washboard when you go back tonight." Kneel on the washboard? What is a washboard? Although Douglas knew a lot about Chinese culture, he still couldn't understand what Kinzu meant, and could only look at him blankly. It's better if you don't know. Kinzu touched his nose, not knowing how to explain, and simply changed the subject. Let's talk about the shares. 30% is really too much. No, not at all. Douglas couldn't understand Kinzu's reaction. Is there really someone in this world who thinks too much money is too hot to handle? To be honest, I'm taking advantage of you. I only invested a few $100 million in building the factory and buying the land. Even if you weigh the investment in technology, it still doesn't reach the 70% standard. Doug, you can't say that. Kinzu laughed and retorted, some technologies can't be bought no matter how much money you spend. Although $1 billion sounds like a lot, 30% is still a bit too much. After Kinzu said this, Douglas didn't know how to answer and could only shrug helplessly. I can't convince you, but now that this matter has been decided, it can't be changed. 30% is 30%, not a bit less. Kinzu thought that this guy had compromised after hearing what Douglas said, but he didn't expect that he would make the decision directly. Facing Douglas with a determined face, although Kinzu felt a little ashamed, he could only nod helplessly. Okay, I'll listen to you. I'll transfer the money tomorrow. Happy National Day, fellow book friends. Leon is still stuck in traffic now. He is physically and mentally exhausted. Let's leave it at that for now. Chapter 1023. People who couldn't believe it. But, with a roar that was getting closer and closer, a silver-white business jet slowly landed on the empty tarmac of the Billings airport. "Boss, this way." When Kinzu walked down from the plane with a tired face, the women waiting on the tarmac immediately surrounded him. "How is it? Is everything going well?" Seeing Kinzu's tired expression, Zhu Mengyo thought that his trip to New York was not going well this time, and she couldn't help but walk over with concern. No, it's okay, it's going well." Rubbing his dry eyes, Kinzu's expression was a little embarrassed. He didn't dare to say that the reason he was like this was because he had been tossing and turning with Christine all night last night. "It's good that it's going well, then let's go back first." Zhu Mengyo, who didn't notice the change in Kinzu's expression, took his arm and walked towards the helicopter parked on the other side. "It's still a bit troublesome now. When our own runway is built, we can fly directly to the ranch." "Yes." Kinzu nodded in agreement and said with a smile, "Now everything is ready. We just need to wait for the runway to be completed, and the plane can fly directly to the ranch." "Clean, what type of plane did you buy this time?" Looking at Kinzu curiously, Zhu Mengyo asked with a smile. "Airbus or Gulfstream? I didn't hear you explain it clearly on the phone." "Ha, Mengyo, you must have never heard of this brand." Touching his nose, Kinzu said mysteriously, "Why don't you guess it? There will be a reward if you guess it right." This, looking at Kinzu's arrogant expression with some hesitation, Zhu Mengyo felt amused and a little competitive. There are only a few companies in the world that have private jet business. Can you come up with another one?" It was with this idea that Zhu Mengyo hesitated for a while and guessed under Kinzu's smirking gaze. "Gulfstream? No. Boeing? No. Bombardier? No. Looking at Kinzu in surprise, Zhu Mengyo muttered somewhat dissatisfiedly, "Honey, you can't lie to me. If you don't buy that plane from these companies, where else can you buy it?" "How could I lie to you?" Touching his nose with a guilty conscience, Kinzu turned around and said seriously, "Mengyo, this plane is produced by our own manufacturing plant." "What?" Stopping, Zhu Mengyo turned around and looked at Kinzu in surprise. She even reached out and touched his forehead. "It's not hot, why are you talking nonsense?" Looking at Zhu Mengyo in a depressed manner, Kinzu wanted to slap her little butt. "What's your reaction? Although it is impossible for our family to have an aircraft manufacturing plant under normal circumstances, don't you know that there are miracles in this world?" Puchi, Kinru, who was following beside him, didn't give his brother any face at all. After seeing him being humiliated, she immediately laughed out loud. "Sister-in-law, look how tired my brother is. He's a little stupid. Let's go back quickly." Yes. Let's go back quickly." After coming back to her senses from the surprise, Zhu Mengyo nodded in agreement, and walked straight to the helicopter with the depressed Kinzu. "Hey, don't you really believe what I said?" He shrugged indifferently. Although he was hit by his wife and sister one after another, Kinzu didn't care at all, and even showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Because he believed that when these two girls knew the truth of the matter, their reaction would definitely be greater than it is now. It seemed that Zhu Mengyo saw some clues from Kinzu's expression. She was originally going to continue to tease Kinzu, but her heart suddenly skipped a beat. "Well, dear, what you said can't be true." Sitting on the somewhat soft seat inside the helicopter, after fastening her seatbelt, Zhu Mengyo couldn't help but feel curious and asked again with some uncertainty. Chapter 1024. Not a simple investment. The roar of the helicopter continued to ring in her ears, but Zhu Mengyo seemed to have not heard it. She stared at Kinzu in front of her, not knowing what to say. This guy's luck is too good, right? He can even encounter such a thing. Is there any reason why the eldest son of Doug Industry can't succeed in starting a business? Isn't this obviously giving him money? Zhu Mengyo, who didn't know the inside story, was not very reassured about such a good thing that came to her door. She couldn't help but said with some concern, "Clean, show me the contract. There is something wrong with this matter." Something wrong? Kinzu turned around with some surprise. "What's wrong? Isn't this normal?" "Normal?" Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes helplessly. "Do you think it's normal for someone to suddenly give you hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars for free?" I'm paying the principal, right?" Touching his nose, Kinzu said in confusion. $1 billion is not given out for nothing. It's normal to have some interest." "Yes, it's normal." Nodding in denial, Zhu Mengyo immediately asked, Then do you think there are many people in Douglas' circle of friends who can give out $1 billion? There should be quite a few, right? Kinzu touched his nose subconsciously. Then why did he choose you? Do you have a good relationship? Zhu Mengyu asked jokingly. Clean, Douglas would rather give the money to you, a Chinese, than to the white people. It seems that your relationship is really special. It would have been better if he didn't say it. As soon as Zhu Mengyu mentioned the sensitive issue of Chinese people, Kinzu woke up instantly. Yes, although he is now an American citizen, he is not a white person after all. In this country full of racial discrimination, Douglas's current behavior is really inexplicable. Kinzu was getting more and more scared the more he thought about it. He took out his cell phone and started yelling, regardless of the fact that he was still on the helicopter. David, is it convenient for you now? Come and help me look at a contract. Now? David, who received Kinzu's call, looked at the time on his wrist and said with a smile, I can't get to you for a while. What's the contract? Just fax it to me. Okay, I'll send it to you later. Kinzu touched his nose and remembered that things were different now. David should still be in New York at this time. Even if he was faster, he would probably arrive tomorrow morning. Of course, this is based on the premise that he can catch the last flight. After he had something on his mind, Kinzu felt that time passed very slowly. It was only about an hour's journey, but it seemed like it took several days. When the helicopter finally landed at the ranch, Kinzu didn't want to wait even a moment and jumped off it directly. There was no way. He thought he had gotten a great deal, but in the blink of an eye, he found that he seemed to have been cheated. Clean, slow down, don't be impatient. Zhu Mengyu, who was following behind, shook her head with a bit of amusement and hurried to catch up. How can I not be impatient? Kinzu pouted and muttered while faxing the contract to David. If the guy dares to fool me, I'll see how I'll deal with him. How? He's cheating you openly, what can you say? Chapter 1025 The key to the problem. Boss, is this the contract Douglas gave you? After receiving Kinzu's fax, David read it carefully, and then picked up the phone to call Kinzu. Yeah, what's the matter? Is there a problem with the contract? Kinzu was a little nervous when he asked this question. No matter from which aspect, he didn't want to be cheated by Douglas. There is no big problem. After hesitating for a while, David asked uncertainly, Boss, can you confirm the accuracy of the data of the new aircraft? Although he didn't want to admit it, Kinzu still scratched his head awkwardly. I also heard about it from Douglas. I haven't seen the actual product yet. This is a big troublesome. David paused and said helplessly, Boss, because the basis of your cooperation is that there is a new business jet that is about to be mass-produced. If there is any problem with this aircraft, or it is simply fictitious, then it is very likely that your billion-dollar investment will go down the drain. It shouldn't be that serious. Kinzu touched his nose and said this with a little bit of uncertainty. Although Krishna is a relative of Doug's family, in this country where money is supreme, even brothers can kill each other, so what can cousins count for? What's more, he didn't trick his cousin, but just a friend of his cousin. David, who was on the other end of the line, saw that Kinzu suddenly fell silent, and seemed to know what he was thinking. He smiled and comforted him. Boss, you don't have to worry too much. This is just a hypothesis after all. If the plane really has problems, you are not the only one who will suffer the loss. But they can afford the loss, can I? Kinzu shrugged helplessly. That's $1 billion. Although it won't hurt me, it will still hurt for a long time. But there is nothing we can do about it. David smiled and teased. The contract has been signed. From a legal point of view, you are now a shareholder of the new company, so we can only pray that the plane will not have any problems. I hope so. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu slumped on the sofa and sighed a little depressed. This is really worrying. I can't even rest for a few more days. What's wrong? What did David say? Zhu Mengyu, who knew that Kinzu was on the phone, waited until he hung up the phone before pushing the door and walking in. David didn't say anything. Waving his hands, Kinzu rubbed his head and explained. For now, the situation is still relatively stable. Now we just need to look at the various data of the new aircraft to see if it is as mysterious as Douglas said. What if it is? Zhu Mengyu asked curiously. Then we will wait to count the money. Kinzu leaned on the sofa, stretched his waist contentedly, and said with a smile, then we can really sit at home and not go out, and count the money every day. Kinzu's beautiful vision, in Zhu Mengyu's ears, not only did not make her relax, but made her more nervous. Clean. What if the data of the new aircraft does not meet the standards? What should I do? Kinzu straightened up and looked at Zumengyo with some amusement. It's very simple, $1 billion is just given away for free. $1 billion? Although Zumengyo was mentally prepared, the number Kinzu said still made her heart beat twice. That's $1 billion, and it's US dollars. Converted into the currency of her own country, that would be several billion. The most important thing is, if the elders at home knew that this guy gave away so much money for nothing, they would not know how to laugh at him. Thinking of this, Zumengyo sighed helplessly and looked at the sunset outside the window. The reason why she didn't want to go home was that her parents didn't live at home, and those gossiping women were what Zumengyo hated the most. Every time they met, they either compared this with that or compared that with this, which made her very annoyed. If it wasn't for this reason, how could she not go home for so long to take a look? What's the situation now? The more she thought about it, the more she felt a headache. Zumengyo came straight to Kinzu and sat down, and asked with concern. Clean, is there no way to avoid losses? Mengyo, don't worry, I'm just talking about the worst outcome. Seeing Zumengyo's serious expression, Kinzu couldn't help but become serious. The only thing we need to confirm now is whether there are any problems with the new aircraft designed by Douglas. How do we confirm this? Zumengyo asked with some confusion while breathing a sigh of relief. His aircraft has not been built yet, how can we confirm it? You don't have to worry about this. Kinzu waved his hand indifferently. As long as we build the runway first, I will be able to get the new aircraft here for testing. Build a runway? Zumengyo nodded thoughtfully and asked with a smile. Boss, have you decided where to build it? The terrain here is not suitable for building a runway. That's what I'm worried about. Kinzu stood up and walked slowly to the window, looking at the small mountains surrounding in the distance, and said helplessly, the terrain here is still no problem for parking helicopters, but it's still a bit difficult to park a business jet. What should we do then? As he said this, Zumengyo also followed, looking at the sunset outside the window, and asked, do we have to find a new place to build a runway? It's better to consult the designer for this. Kinzu shook his head, picked up his mobile phone, and called the project manager of the construction company he had been cooperating with. The phone was connected after only 2 rings. When Kinzu revealed his identity, a familiar voice instantly appeared on the other end of the phone. After a long pause, the two finally got to the point. When Kinzu described his purpose, the other party immediately patted his chest and guaranteed that it could be built. Come to think of it, even those deep mountains and old forests can build runways, so what's wrong with his? Okay, wait for them to come tomorrow and let the designer take us to choose a place. Kinzu stretched, stood up, and said with a smile, Mengyo, it's time for you to prepare dinner. We don't have a nanny at the moment. Findy est captulo much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No esse olvidentid al like bus gasms contenido exclusivo ixo immediato. Si escrabata news to Patreon. Recurda, card alike, si scripts in O'Donoghue nos anima a continue. Great as a todos nos vemos on Alpxmovdo.